chat.
We're going to work.
Work. Okay. See you there. And I'll see you later.
All right. We're on. All right. Hello, Nat. We're streaming.
Hello. We are doing a stream momentarily, just FYI. Doing my as promised. Uh,
Yeah. War stream.
Yep. War.
War.
Huh. What is it good
is
for?
Good for?
Hello.
Hello, Moon.
Hello.
How doing? That good, huh?
I'm making mac and cheese. It's fine.
Okay.
Food is good.
I woke up with a headache. A tension headache. So.
Oh, I should. Are you live yet? Don't go live yet if you're not. You are? Damn it. Okay, I'll change the stream title anyway. Creator dashboard.
I'll be on mute once my mac and cheese gets done. Lower.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
And ignore me. I'm just also working work. I'm working work. Nothing.
Deze bijna volgens mij met praten, dan denk ik toch ook dat je tegen bent. Oké.
Well, that bell war and where what is it good for is maybe not a bad idea because I am also planning a Greek tragedy. Tragedy.
Yeah.
Yes, you will need a war usually for those.
Well, it will be a retelling of about Megara. Instead of that Heracles is killing her, she is killing him. It's self-defense, but she's killing him.
Hello, Sparkles. Welcome. Hello. Sparkles has come to offer his input today on this amazing subject.
Nice.
How to plan a war. It's very simple. There is no planning. You just go and fight it.
Oh, isn't that... No.
Sorry. The officers say they plan the war, and you listen to that plan.
Yes. And then everything goes to hell when you get there, and the NCOs figure out what they actually can accomplish, and then the war is fought. Yes.
And then the generals get their medal, and everyone is happy.
Pretty much.
Ad break starts in 2 minutes.
I have pages of notes on this.
I was going to say,
yeah.
I was going to say, the basis of war. You send your soldiers to fight, or how to plan a war. You send your soldiers to fight, the generals get a medal, and everyone is happy. Because the general told you that you are. I just spent $1,000 on computer parts that are coming over the next 2 days. I'm building myself a new computer because this one can't have more than a few things open before going.
I need a new computer.
And I understand. This is why Aaron does the streaming.
Yeah, I was gonna say my
to be computer fair, is fucking buggy as hell.
I was gonna say, like, I love my computer, but the darned thing is over 10 years old now. Like, I love you. I mean, you were my first custom computer, but damn, can you not run shit anymore?
Yeah, I love my computer too, but Steve thought it was thirsty and dumped a coffee on it.
No,
It
no, no.
was an
Was,
accident, but yes.
was it iced coffee?
No.
Oh, I was gonna say maybe he was trying to cool it off, but no, that doesn't work with hot coffee.
Yeah, no. Alright, so now my USB ports don't work.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I haven't. I want to say for all the shit I put on my computer, including coffee mugs and stuff, I have been incredibly lucky that nothing has actually spilled on it, except for dust, copious and copious amounts of dust.
And dog hair.
And
Surprisingly,
randomly
no, I've not
crashes
found dog hair in there.
and
Hmm.
the video card overheats and
So the dog hair I've actually been quite fortunate with, Natalie, because all my fans I put a mesh screen over that's a really fine mesh screen, so it actually catches all that before it gets into my computer, but it doesn't catch the dust because dust is eldritch and evil and small enough to get through it.
ad break. How long are these ad breaks?
I don't
Wow.
know. A while. Twitch is
And
stupid that way.
yeah. Ooh, wait, I'm on 31 months.
Are you? Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Woot.
Damn, that's 2.5 years.
It is.
I've known you guys for 2.5 years. That's super bizarre.
No, you probably known us longer than that. That's just when you decided that, your limited money was in some way worth spending here, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Sparkles, you've known me for over 4 years now.
Moon, you know that I'm not good at keeping track of time.
I have markers. I have markers that help me, right? One marker is that I got World Anvil in the winter of 2019 to reward myself for a personal record in finishing Nano early, which by then was all of a week early. For those of you who know what the current word counts look like, this is almost cute, I suppose. Right. And then, but that was a personal record for me at the time, and I was very excited about it. And, you know, um, and this is meant to say that see you can practice and get better at stuff and it will happen, right? But anyway, yeah, so that was my thing. So that's when I joined World Anvil, right? And we are now on about to begin season 4 of Game of Tomes.
That is such a bizarre thing to
I
think about.
Isn't it?
think I think I met you also in 2019 when you entered Mr. Fox's stream.
Yes, you met me almost right away because I started looking out for the Anvilite streamers and I found
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Fox.
Yeah,
Yep.
he is not planning to come back.
That is sad.
Who? What happened?
Work, life,
No, who's not coming back?
Mr. Fox,
I don't know who Mr. Fox is.
Karen, Karen. Yeah,
Wait, ad break is over. We can go to the
he does not stream
Indian
anymore,
stream.
so
Give it just a couple more minutes to wait for people to get here before we get on camera, but yeah.
hi,
Yeah,
Scooter.
it's gonna be fun. Yes, that's Scooter in the background. Don't mind him. He's howling because I have shut the door to the room. You know what? I should probably put him in here before I get started. He'll be quiet that way. 1 sec. Hi, shithead. Come on, keep me company, buddy. You're a good kitty.
I don't know why, but that was the most mom thing I ever heard.
Oh yeah, really right?
Come on, shithead. Yeah. Hey, mom.
There you guys go. You know what? I should just leave the door open a little bit. so that the animals can go in and out. So you may hear background sound from the kitchen.
Yeah,
Dun,
I hear
dun,
that.
dun.
Yeah, as long as I can't remember what I was gonna say now. My brain just suddenly went, "Hey, reset." What? Why? Don't you hate when that happens when you're talking in like mid sentences? Reset.
My life with ADHD. What? What was I talking about? I'm sure it was important. My throat hurts. I've been talking for a while. Where was
Yeah.
I? Oh
What happened? Who am I?
yeah.
What is this?
What day is this? Yeah.
Who are these kids and why are they calling me mom?
That's right.
Actually, for me, it'd be like, "Who are these kids? What class am I in? Where am I? Oh, right, I'm the teacher."
Shit. Yeah.
You know what? I swear to God, there's gonna be one of those days where I'm gonna wake up and it's gonna be like, "Oh crap, I'm late for school." No, wait. No, wait. I don't go to school anymore. I'm fine. Lay back down. Crap, I'm the teacher.
I know for a fact one of those days will come.
I'm gonna turn you
ADHD
off.
means your brain is full of doors, and every time you go through one, you forget what you came there for. Facts, kids. How are you? That is the fact. That is how it goes.
Uh, that is unfortunately how it goes.
Hey, I don't want to jinx it, but I see we're up to 970 followers now. Thank you very
Yeah.
much for all your support,
You
guys.
guys are awesome.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, and I know, knock on wood, right? Because it's been stuck at
950.
950 for like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. You're doing very ADHD today yourself. Unfortunately, so am I. So we will hope that this talk makes some logical sense instead of a rambling circuit of nonsense. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but we're going to make an effort. I have notes. I have notes. This is a positive step in the right direction.
I
But
don't
all
know
right.
why. I don't know why, but my phone has just decided. Hey Ben, yeah, you want all of the alerts? Not really. No. Too bad. Here, all of the alerts because my phone's just been going pudding, 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 pudding. This entire conversation, like, but why? But why, like right now?
Oh, cool. You're adapting some Spelljammer stuff.
Yep.
Cool.
Oh, fun.
All right.
I recently actually took a look at the Spelljammer book recently. It's
Uh-huh.
not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it still seems really unbalanced, at least from the 5th edition standpoint.
It is generally agreed by people who like systems and games that it is a shit show.
Yeah,
So it's fine.
I was
But
going to say, yeah, it's kind of how it feels. No offense to the writers of D&D, but damn.
all
Damn.
right. Kids is here for some asymmetrical guerrilla warfare. But first, just get
Tangent.
the kids' juice. Oh, sorry, Moon. Aru?
What was that,
I
Moon?
will say tangent every time you're on a tangent and tangent.
That will be helpful. Okay. Yes. Let's get started, shall we? Hi there. For those of you who don't know me, or those of you who do, I don't know. You've heard this introduction a million times now. My name is Diane Morrison. I'm known in the community as Sable. I am a writer of space opera war fiction series that it's actually underway now, but I've been working on it for about a decade. I This is one of my favorite subjects, war in fiction, and not because I'm a fan of war, but because I'm a fan of what it says about the human condition, actually.
And she's a fan of fiction.
And I'm a fan of fiction. See, there you go. This makes perfect sense. Um, I've done a couple other things that might be relevant to the conversation. I've been doing martial arts in kind of a very mixed and sporadic format for about 20 5 years on and off. Um, I've had some very good teachers and have been very inconsistent with my practice. Let's just say that, right? And I used to do the Society for Creative Anachronism, where I dressed up in medieval style armor and beat people with a stick and let them beat me with the stick to simulate medieval combat. Um, I'm here to help people, especially people who don't really feel they know a lot about how war works, to help you bring it into your story and make it more effective depending on what it is you want to do. So what I'm going to cover is the different reasons you might introduce a war into your novels or campaign. Um, kind of focusing on what you would need to know for what it is you're trying to accomplish and how you intend to use this war in your story. And then kind of the basics of how the thinking of war works so that your allies and enemies can act in a way that makes sense and it sounds to the reader or the players like you know what you're talking about. Am I actually going to teach you what war is about here and how it works and anything resembling real military science? No, right? Because I'm going to give you some very basic stuff so that you can lay it out for yourself and have an idea of how the conflict is going to unfold in the course of your story, whatever it might be. Um, but it's a big subject and it takes a long time to understand something that is at once very simple and very complex. At heart, what a war is well, okay, people have said a lot of things about it. Clausewitz, the war is a continuation of diplomacy by other means. Um, at least two parties have a disagreement over what they want to happen. They come to an impasse about it. They decide that they're gonna have to fight. Um, and then generally thousands of people go kill each other over it, whatever it might be. Hello, author goddess. Good to see you.
Luigi.
Yes. Oh, yes. I suppose before I go any further, I should introduce my sort of panel of guests here. All right. So I am joined by my husband, Aaron Ree.
Yo.
He was a junior officer in the Canadian Navy. He has been a game master for forever. He'll probably have better insights on game master stuff than I will. I do game master as well, but mostly I'm a writer. Um, we have Moonflower, who is my logistics person. And logistics are some of the most important things you need to know to keep a war active. Hello, Moon.
Hello.
We are joined by Mr. Teacher Writes. He is a historian with a special interest in war. We get into conversations, nerdy conversations that bore the pants off of everybody else in the chat about war and military history quite a lot.
It gets
So
very noodly. It gets very noodly.
it gets noodly. It's fun. It's fun. I love it. And we have Purple Heart, Natalia Books, who is an author of several series now. And she generally is coming at it from the perspective of, I don't know a damn thing about war. Tell me. So hopefully she will ask some very useful questions, which is awesome.
And feel free to ask questions too, but put question in all caps before the beginning of it so we know you got a question coming.
Yeah, and that'll draw our attention to it too.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So let's start with, why are we having a war?
Always a great question.
Always.
Or use this, redeem ask a question, which is a channel point function that I never disabled actually, deliberately, which is a good point. Yes, and that will also draw attention to it. Only costs 5 channel points, so we wanted to keep it accessible. Okay, so why do you need to have a war? Nobody really wants a war
'Cause
except
somebody's
maybe
wrong.
defense contractors. Yeah, because nobody's wrong. Yeah, nobody really wants one, right? Wars are expensive. They are costly in terms of lives. They risk some of your most important assets, right? They're not generally a good plan. You have
Or
a war
investment.
or investment. Yeah, exactly, right? You have a war if you believe that that is the only option that you have. That includes tyrannical dark lord assholes. Yes, it does. They don't
Mhm.
just start wars because I want to defeat the forces of good. And there's got to be something in it for them,
Mhm.
right? So, one of the most important things you will do when you're planning your war is in thinking about the combatants, the belligerents. We're going to use some terminology here and explain what it means so that you can read about war yourself and understand what the hell people are talking about, right? The belligerents, the parties who are at war against each other, um, there's something in it for both of them, even if it's survival. Right, which is often the case in asymmetrical warfare, which we just had a big focus on in the World Anvil Summer Camp military conflict category, which is what led to this stream. So um it's gotten to a point, whatever the issue is, that only force is going to resolve it. Well, I mean, sometimes ego makes them think they can win when they're actually really underprepared, says author goddess, wisely avoiding looking at Russia. We're going to be bringing the war in Ukraine a lot today because it's a very good example of a lot of the principles of how war works unfolding live as we speak, and you can see it for yourself in action, right? And that's a valid point, right? Yes, obviously Putin got more than he bargained for by starting this fight, right? He was like, I'm going to go pick on the little kid, and the little kid turned out to be a black belt, and he's going, holy fuck. Yes, that's exactly what's going on. But why did he start
Well,
it? There was
actually,
something in it he wanted,
he went
right?
there for a knife fight and couldn't get his knife out of the sheath because it was rusted in there.
That's also more accurate, which is going to bring us down or back to the issue of logistics are very important when planning a war.
See,
Yes.
the Russian military pisses me right off.
Actually, you know what? Since we're on the subject, why don't we back some, babe? This is actually a very point. We're here at the beginning, and planning your logistics is one of the first things that the belligerents in a war are going to do. Say you're going to start a war, or say you know coming. You're going to look to your logistics. What are logistics? Logistics are the thing that makes the war function, right? It's the equipment, it's the men or troops, right? It's the ships, it's the planes, it's the food, it's the medical supplies, it's that stuff, right?
It's the thing that mostly is being forgotten by a lot of parties.
This is a real problem in fantasy literature, especially that I see a lot. The writer does not give enough thought to the process of logistics. In order for an army to march, it has to eat, right? In order for people to fight, they need equipment to fight with. How are they getting it? Because especially if they're cut off in enemy territory, that might be really difficult, right? So let's bring it back to Russia, babe. Tell me what Russia pisses you off, and then I would love to hear what Moon has to say on this too.
Okay.
Like, yeah,
Russia pisses me off because I'm a Cold War soldier. Right?
yes,
I am a soldier who served during the time when, you know, basically the world was at war, but it wasn't doing anything.
yeah.
Right?
The Cold War, the undeclared.
Hello, Clock Rocket.
Hello.
Um, right? Then, you see, we were given all the logistical information up front at the time. So we understood things like what our life expectancy was. See, we understood that in a land fight in Europe, the only place to fight it is the Fulda Gap, right? And so everything was based on the logistics of fighting in the Fulda Gap. And you knew that the Russian army had good tactical uh, responses, right? My whole life expectancy from the moment that the guns start firing was 2.5 minutes.
In other words, Russia was a very big, very scary,
Right.
and people in the Cold War were generally convinced that if we were to actually openly go to war with Russia,
It
shit
would
was
just be a
going to be ugly.
bloodbath. It was an
Yeah.
ugly bloodbath that, basically was just piles of corpses on each other. Right?
Hence the Cold War, a war that was happening even though it wasn't openly declared. Because the minute you openly declare war and the bombs start flying, yikes.
Yeah.
Right? So why does Russia piss you off in particular these days?
Because they were supposed to be this great, powerful enemy that was over there, right? The Soviet Union, right? And now, right, in like 40 years later, right, 35 years later, right, their military is falling apart because they got nothing. They kept up with nothing. Their logistics are complete failures.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And basically nothing's been maintained since World War II. So we knew they had all these tanks and all these mortars and all these, artillery pieces and stuff like that, right? Left over from World War II, right? Well, apparently what they did with them is stuck them in warehouses and left them there. Right?
Or they sold stuff because of
Or they
corruption.
sold it, yeah.
Right? And they did things like, oh, we got a bunch of new tanks, and they sold the new tanks, right? And then put old tanks in the warehouse and said, we have 10 tanks in this warehouse, right? That's what they did.
Yeah.
Skimming off the top and skimming off the top and
Yep.
skimming off the top, and
And that's
nothing
why
left in
they're
the whole
they're
sky.
getting their asses handed to them in the Ukraine right now, is because all their equipment is faulty. Right?
Author Goddess has a point there. I've been watching. Author Goddess is going to have some commentary today, I can see, which does not surprise me, actually. Right? She says, "I wonder how much of that was actual fears from the top, or just the top realizing it would be bad enough to not be worth it, and use fear propaganda to help keep everyone else from doing something they'd have to fix or deal with later. Not that propaganda is necessarily false, just goal oriented." Yeah, that's a valid.
It's
That's a
valid.
valid question.
Hey, Kit.
Wouldn't put it past them. Oh, hey, Kit, how doing? Welcome to war. Huh? What is it good for?
You see, but we were
Yeah.
afraid of them. Right? And it turns out that if we'd gone to war, right, it would have been a bloodbath, all right. Right?
Yeah.
A Russian bloodbath.
All right, so let's turn to Moon and talk a bit more about the importance of logistics, or what it was that she was going to say before Aaron started. Either way, I invite you to speak on whatever you wanted to say there, Moon.
An important thing to remember is that before food preservation techniques got really, really good, war was hungry.
Yeah.
War was hungry.
Such as in the best example I remember is the journal from the Revolutionary War in America.
Mm-hmm.
These soldiers were not being given their rations because their rations ran out. And they were having to forage a lot. So it's a good thing to remember that forage is a valid option for many people in quote unquote enemy territory or even in their own territory if they don't have the supplies that they need for food.
And by forage, it also depends upon what
And
area you're in. If you're in a rural
mhm.
area, then you're talking about small animals or game and stuff like that. If you're in an urban area, it's talking about kicking indoors and taking food.
Or rats too. Like sometimes you get really desperate.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
generally it's worth noting that forage means beating up whatever enemy populace you're in and shit. Yes.
Yeah.
and another thing to remember is that supplies are heavy. Sometimes you can't
Yeah.
have your cook pot because it's too heavy to carry.
Yeah. And you're right, canning was developed to help with that, their author goddess, right?
Yep.
But also remember that cans are heavy,
Yep.
right?
Soldiers in peak shape need a lot of calories. If they're not getting them, yeah, then it limits what they can do to fight, right? Napoleon found this out to his chagrin when he tried to invade Russia, right?
Not only Napoleon.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, invading Russia is
Yeah.
just don't, right? It's a well-known thing in because you have to cross this vast amount of land that is enemy territory. And the Russians, they've always been bastards. Their idea is scorched earth policy. If I can't have it because you're going to kick me out of it, you can't have it either. I'm going to burn it to the ground and take everything valuable before I leave.
Yeah, that
Can I
goes
Right?
make
all the
it?
way back to the Kievan Rus and stuff like that. You know,
Can I
like,
make it?
what's that?
I was gonna say, can I say something?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, this is a very good opportunity for our war historian to give his opinion.
So,
Yes.
so everyone makes the joke, "Don't invade Russia during winter," and it's a famous joke. It's funny. I love it. I grew
Yeah.
up with it. It should be noted that Hitler and Napoleon both started in June, and the Russians, being bastards, basically purposely fought tooth and nail because they knew the winter would be on their side. They knew that if they could get them
Yeah.
deep enough into Russia, but slow them down enough, that by the time that they got to Moscow, it'd be hell. One of the most famous things that they did was um, because Napoleon and Hitler, I believe, both had gone deep, deep, deep into Russia, but they had also made like plans of the landscape of like where the farms, where the factories were, because they were gonna savage them. So what did they do? The Russians put a frontal line, hold them down as long as possible, while the back line basically burns the farm, salt the earth, destroys the factories, break the roads, and then by the time that they get there, there's no food, there's no animals, there's nothing, and
Yep.
thus logistics are a bastard.
Scorched earth
Yes.
policy.
Our Lord of the Rings dudes, okay, would have died in Moria
Yeah.
Yeah.
because they did not have enough shit. Here's how it works, right? Warfare where there were horses involved, which was every war up to World War II. Okay,
Yep. Even up
they
to
used
World
them
War
in
Two.
World War One actively. This is how long we used horses for throughout human history. Very
Mm-hmm.
important information. Okay, right? You need a minimum of 3 horses per 1 soldier. 1 horse to carry them, 1 horse to carry their supplies, and 1 horse to carry the supplies for the horses. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have 3 horses per soldier, it's a shit show, right? So, where were they? Moria? Yeah, that was okay. That I don't know. I've had arguments with about Lord of the Rings in general. Tolkien was pretty good about thinking about logistics. He was, after all, a World War One veteran himself,
Yep. And
right?
a cavalry, and I believe he worked with the horses, so he understood logistics probably better than anyone.
Correct. But in that particular area would have fallen because
Yeah.
they hadn't yet met the elves, so they did not have elven way bread, lembas, right? And they, which takes up less space and is less heavy but more nourishing, right? Supplies are heavy, right? And they abandoned their horses because they couldn't take the horses into the mines, right? So, yeah.
It surprises me that they didn't get food from Rivendell.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
they
a
did,
real.
but
Or did they?
they didn't have enough horses to carry it all. That would have been
It,
necessary.
Yeah. I don't know. People, this is a fan argument. You're going to, but it is a good, regardless of where you fall on that, it's a good illustration of how important logistics and supplies are in that setting, right? Now, I see a lot of good comments here, right? I'll address some of them. Stop long enough to do that. Author Goddess says, Navy SEALs Hell Week burns approximately 8,000 calories a day, making it the only training that requires hot, frequent meals to prevent actual death. I don't know that it's the actual training. It might be the only current training that does that, and that's questionable because there's lots of stuff we don't know about what different militaries do, especially with their special forces. But it is uncommon, right? And it is worth noting, right? Yeah, it's really important. If you're burning that many calories a day, like heavy training, Navy training, right? Then yeah, you need more food, and you got to, and it's got to be hot in some cases, be exhausted and die of exposure, right? Um, Now other comments here. Clockwalk, it says my grandpa the 101st. Your grandpa was in the 101st day. Cool. We're going to talk about the 101st today, actually. Used to tell stories of one of his unit trying to put chicken into soup in their helmet, lugging it around not on their head for quite a while during World War II. Yep. Yep.
I actually have a story myself from World War II that a friend of mine shared with me recently.
Can we do
Where
it briefly? I'm sure we'll
it
inform
is,
the audience, but you have to cover a lot of material. So awesome.
it is very short.
All right, let's hear it.
If any of you know about the Dirty Dozen, there is an actual person that the field is based off of called James McNeese, and there is a part of his biography. My favorite part is that while he was part of Operation Market Garden, he found a hen house full of eggs. He had 6 eggs, which, if you don't know, in World War II was like finding the fucking Shangri-La. It was wonderful, and he literally put them in his cargo pants, and throughout the entire mission, instead of crawling, would slide on the side opposite of the eggs to prevent breaking the eggs. This is how important food was.
That's a very valuable story there, actually. Yeah. Yeah. And Author Goddess says that's where the fan theory comes in. Hobbits actually things due to their love of shrooms. Therefore, what would have been inedible to men was edible to hobbits. It's an interesting theory. Yeah, you know what? Actually, that might very well have solved the problem for you because surely the place was full of mushrooms. I'm sure dwarves can also eat them. So, Gandalf is an angel or close to it, probably can go without food for a long period of time. We know that elves can go without food longer than men can. So basically, you'd only have to worry about Boromir and Aragorn, right? And that probably would be fine with the rations they had on hand. So yeah, that's a valid way to explain it for sure. Katoy says my grandfather survived the Bataan Death March. Ooh, yikes! Because he was able to take off his socks and fill one with sugar and the other with flour. He hid them under his clothes. I think. Wow, that's a story. Yeah, smart man, very smart. I've got a warning here that's I think in oh wait, no, we're not yet in an ad break, but we're going to be soon, I think. So when it starts, we will take a break.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. I don't want anybody to miss any. All right, so let's get back to why are you having your now the belligerents are going to have different reasons why they're having, and like I said, even the Dark Lord of the Sith, right, isn't going to start a war just because he wants to beat up all the good guys. Nobody does that. It's a waste of time, right? Too much work, too much expense. So why? Maybe the Dark Lord feels that in order to secure whatever he has to secure everything else around it as well, right? This was Hitler's logic, right? Hitler was like, all right, so they fucked us, Germany, right, in World War I with operations. Our economy has been crap ever since. If they're not going to give us what we need, we're going to take it, right? And then he decided to invade everybody else around, right? Real life Dark Lord being an evil bastard, right? But he had his reasons why he thought he was justified in going. Everybody else went, if we don't stop this asshole, he's going to take over the world and then it'll be speaking German for the rest of our lives. No. And that is why the world went to war, right? Hey, Kindar, welcome. Roar Books indeed. If you haven't checked out Kindar yet, you definitely should. He is a writer. He's a fellow Canadian. He's a lot of fun. Now he's a Tome Knight. He's pretty cool. Does some really great, mostly furry fiction. It's awesome. Check it out. Author, we have all kinds of very good stuff about supplies here, which I think are really great. Author Goddess says flour, sugar, 24-hour culturing makes a not great tasting but edible kind of flat cake. Pretty sure the socks would provide the microbes for the culturing. That makes sense, actually. And then she adds lack of yeast can be solved by long fermenting, rising of bread after kneading by hand. The yeast we use in bread is commonly found on skin, in case you ever need to make bread with virtually nothing. That is a really good thing to know. People are writing about fiction where they want limited supplies to be one of the obstacles that the characters are facing, which is a very much expected part of warfare at some point, right? It's a little late now. I just stopped streaming. Kinder. Oh, thank you, James. Yes, what was I talking about there? Yes, limited supplies. Right. Limited. You can almost certainly expect that to come into play at some point. For those of you who know about the Game of Tomes and the Game of Tomes cookbook idea that we're putting together, there's going to be recipes in it that are called things like Queen Sable's wartime stir fry. Right? How to make dinner out of like 3 apples, some rice, and a handful of frozen peas, assuming you still have power. That kind of stuff. Yeah, supplies are hard. Love this, but it's 100% a tangent. Throw in your enemies, says Tiger Writes. People have done that.
Normally it's frowned upon.
It is generally frowned upon. Yes. All right, so why are you having a war? You're right. And what are you doing as the why are you having a war? What is it that you're trying to accomplish with this war? Now, the question is what you're going to do with it in your story, right? Are you using it as a method to showcase changes in society? Like, let me see. Les Miserables, the original novel by Victor Hugo, had an insurrection in it that was the focus of the action. Most of you are at least familiar with the plot of the musical, so you can at least follow. There's an uprising of the poor citizens of Paris, right? It was unsuccessful. For Victor Hugo, he was trying to show kind of the transformation of a society through the process of a movement and how it affected the people in there. So, frankly, when you're doing that, right, you want different details than you do if, say, the war is an emotional journey for the characters. Say you want to show how the story is about your character and how war has affected them and changed their outlook, right? In this case, you're going to want to know different things. In a way, in that particular plot, the war might become mostly a background. And what you really need to know is kind of the general progress of the war, but you don't need to know specifics. Maybe a couple of major battles or turning points that you can throw your character into so that the character can deal with the consequences of that. That's what you're going to want to know. You don't need to know the whole story. You don't need to know, detailed information about the technology. You might not even need to know much about logistics, although you should have a general idea, right? If your goal is the war, that's the plot. This is war fiction, right? We're going to write about cool battles and shit. We want to have our PCs get involved in the blood war in D&D, right? Whatever it is. Then you need to know a lot about the war. You need to know what the strategic goals are, what's considered a battle won or lost, roughly how many troops are fighting on either side, the equipment involved. You need to know that, a lot of information about it. And I got to tell you that if you don't know what you're talking about in that particular aspect of, the audience has no patience for you, right? They now your PCs might, because hey, maybe war is a new experience for, right? But readers of war fiction will not. They expect things to make sense. They expect your military to at least follow a loose military structure that looks somewhat familiar. Yeah, they're gonna know.
May I point out a fatal sin in one of the books I've read as war fiction? It is actually on a war.
Absolutely.
So as much as I love it and it's a huge inspiration, uh,
Mm-hmm.
Powder
Mm-hmm.
Mage, I love it. It's great. It's a great book. Why the fuck is the field marshal leading a small army into enemy territory and then being completely cut off from the rest of the army? Why is he leading anything personally? And then he's gone for the rest of the war, and then he comes back in book 3 and like he's surprised that the army is completely falling apart. Like, yeah, because you weren't there.
Yeah, and you were the guy in charge.
Why did you decide to take this small like battalion into enemy territory where you kicked ass, by the way? You were awesome the entire time. But you've been gone for like 4 months. Be surprised your country hasn't fallen yet. And be surprised you're not fired yet.
Valid point. There was a book I read. I'm not going to name it to protect the guilty, right? It was an award-winning book, right? So I read it because it was, on this awards list, right? And I, um, okay, so it's about, okay, the problem is it's about a war and none of the war makes sense. The very first scene, there's this army that is known for their military acumen and strength. That is their thing. They are surrounded by other nations that use magic, and they think magic is bad. So they're generally at war with just about everybody, right? There is a not really, it's a nation of nations next to them that's a bunch of, nomadic tribal magic people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And they're leading a scouting mission into the enemy territory to find out where they are. They're trying to scout out their position. Okay. All this makes sense so far, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very first scene, the commander of this small force, who for some reason is commanding a small force, even though he is the son of one of the main political leaders of the nation, is gets into an argument with one of the people under his command, who is calling him out personally on the battlefield as they are scouting out for enemy troops, and they don't know where the enemy is. So, what would happen in the real world if this happened, Barbarossa? Let us know. What would happen in any
Well,
given military?
well, if they're calling them out, well, let's just do a real life example. There was a moment in the Civil War where a man on a horse said, "They can't possibly hit us from here." Bang! Yeah, they're gonna locate the sound, triangulate it, and they're gonna annihilate the fuck out of you.
Which is exactly what happened, of course. And the other thing, which is fine, except that, of course, there were a couple of survivors,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Obviously, you gotta keep the threat going.
right? But what would have happened to the guy who was challenging the guy in charge, assuming everybody survived?
Yeah,
I
they
think
call
he
Mark.
was fired.
Fired is the operative term
Yeah.
with, you know, firing pins and
Yes, that's a crime called insubordination. There is a reason why there is a chain of command. Terry, it's not because people like lording things over each other. That can happen. Mostly what it's about is that you have to obey the person in charge so you can all act quickly and decisively in a battle condition, right? So this guy challenging this leader would be at the very least locked up in irons and tried martial, which is basically just a, criminal in a military force,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or he would be outright killed on the spot,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
no,
what I would have done with the son of a bitch, because how dare you endanger everybody like
yeah,
that? Oh
no,
my
no,
God.
yeah, no, because the thing is, it is not uncommon for someone to question someone's military acumen.
Mhm.
You do not do that when you're on the battlefield. You do that in the planning stages because that's when you need to get your words out. Like another example is in the Thousand Names when they're marching through the desert. They have a new commander. He's unfamiliar with the army. He is, he's basically like the Napoleon in North Africa in this book. And the
Right.
commanding officer is like, we're going to be marching like 15 miles a day in the desert, which is hell. And like the veterans are pissed. The new recruits are full of piss and vinegar. They're going. However, the officer who's helping him is like, the new recruits don't know much about the environment here. The veterans are tired, and I want to know how much they know about forming square. And the commander's like, don't worry, they've been to basic training. And the guy's like, no, I don't think they know how to do it. And he's like, no, don't worry about it. And so the captain tells everyone form square against the commander's orders. And the veterans immediately freak out. They get into perfect square. The recruits are bumbling around, falling over. The carts come to a crashing halt. Everything is just a huge mess. And the commander's like, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, and actually takes advice. So you know, that's not in a battlefield. So that would be a perfect time to be like, I think you're wrong, sir. But
Yeah.
you don't call them out like when you're like right on the front line forming lines with bayonets ready, because by doing that you're threatening everyone in like at least a month's worth of planning.
This is actually fairly common in a lot of militaries, most of to the present day, actually, in some extent or another.
I don't like.
Often your junior officers
Mm-hmm,
have less experience than your more experienced non-commissioned officers,
mm-hmm,
NCOs, which we will be talking about because they are very important. And we can also see examples of what happens when you don't have them in the
mm-hmm.
Russia-Ukrainian war, right? But a smart officer will listen to their NCO, right?
Mm-hmm.
A stupid officer will think they're smarter than that, and just like kids says their creative methods for dealing with bad commanding officers. And hello, Tempest.
but yeah, one of the things I do like about the
Hi,
Thousand Names is
Tempest.
hi Tempest.
Sorry.
One of the things that I do love about the Thousand Names is that the commander actually learns from the mistake. He's like in the book fresh off the boat. Like this is the next day after he arrived, and he's like, no, my new recruits know exactly what they're in for, and like clearly not.
Yeah, and actually, that can be a fun character to write, a junior officer the hard
Mm-hmm.
way. That
Mm-hmm.
can be a lot of fun. Okay, so let's go back to why are you making your war? What is the purpose in your story? That kind of guides what you're going to need to know. Let's go back to the beginning of my notes. What I did on Sunday is usually my spouse day that I spend with my partner Jamie, right? And I do like gaming with Aaron on Saturdays. This is a thing, right? Jamie was a enlisted member of the Canadian Army and he worked in intelligence. He also is a bit of an amateur war historian and knows quite a lot of this. So I picked this was fun for great. So I got notes. I got notes. All right. One of the important things you're going to need to know when your belligerents go to war is what are your strategic assets? Oh, and this gives me another opportunity to cover some terminology that I covered Friday. Let's cover it again. The difference between strategy and tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Strategy, what you intend to do. Tactics, how you intend to do it when you get there, basically. You guys got other definitions you throw in that between
For me,
strategy and tactics?
for me, I've always made the distinguish that strategy is the plan upon arrival, and tactics is the plan when you're there. Because as we all know, no combat ready unit has ever passed inspection, and no inspection ready unit has ever survived combat.
Yes. Yes. Um, another saying is that no plan survives contact with the enemy.
hmm
Right? Who the hell said that? You'll remember, won't you?
I kind of know, but yeah, it's that or Dan Daly. But Dan Daly is also the man who yelled, "Come on, men! Don't you want to live forever?"
Yeah, do you want to
Yeah.
live forever? Exactly. Aaron, you got any additional thoughts about between strategy and tactic?
No.
Okay, so moving on. Strategy, the plan. What are you trying to accomplish? And what
Why are
are
you
your
here?
conditions for victory? Like, what are you trying to do? How do you know you've successfully done it? This is okay. No, go ahead. Actually,
I was
go
going to
ahead.
say the most important question of strategy is why are you here? Because let's be fair here. As much as we love it in movies, fighting in open field is great. It's awesome. Not really how war was fought. Normally, battles, unless you accidentally came across an enemy position, was over important things. Like there's a reason why Gettysburg is at a farm because this was one of the larger farms in the north, and it helped provide it. Plus, Gettysburg just being important in general. Um, and there's a reason why Sherman's March to the Sea basically devastated the South. It went through a very large portion of the cotton belt of the South. So when you decide why you're having a battle in your war, you need to think of strategically why is these battles happening here? Why
Yeah.
are you here?
You have
Why are
thoughts
they
to add to that,
happening at
Cunny?
this spot? Yeah.
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 hmm
You know, to go back to Sun Tzu on Death Ground Fight.
If you have no
Right?
choice but to defend whatever that is, fight. That's his
hmm
principle. So
Yeah.
we'll be going back to Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu.
Right.
Um,
Basically,
uh,
the
yeah.
concept is that otherwise you're just maneuvering, right? And when it comes to the point where there's no more maneuvering, fight,
hmm
right? So why is it happening here?
Yeah, and
Why
that
is
is
this death ground?
yes, and the reason that that's really important, and the reason I want people to really think about that is because while the whole glorious cavalry charge through an open field is great, why is that open field important? Why are they having the battle here? Are
Hmm.
they because normally that open field, as we see in like a lot of wars, that's outside Paris. That's not like in the middle of nowhere. They're
Yeah.
defending Paris.
Right. Which actually that brings up a point when considering strategic assets, which I'm going to touch on here to a break,
hmm
right? And we'll continue this when we get back. But okay, why is Paris important? Why do you, if you're going to war with France, why do you need Paris? Because you do. You have to capture Paris to capture France.
Are you
Why?
legitimately asking me?
Yes.
Oh, it's simple. Because Paris sits on the Seine River, and the Seine River takes up most of France. If you take Paris, you have access to all of France. All of France is basically all roads lead to Rome. All roads in France lead to Paris. It's such an iconic spot too that it's its own little city. There's reasons why when you see like the French Revolution, there's the Battle of Paris Commune because Paris is such its own little area. But once you take Paris, France is open. It's the reason why when Germany blitzkrieg through France, they hit Paris, they were done. They had no way to defend because once you get over that mountain, once you get over the trees, it is open riverland and field. There is nothing protecting it until you get to the French Alps in the south.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How many Frenchmen it takes to defend Paris? Nobody knows. It's never
No.
been tried.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
There's a
And
reason. There's a reason why when France exited World War I, their whole thing was we have to bulker up or bolster up the Maginot Line. We have to bolster up like the river valleys and stuff because the whole point of what they were trying to do was prevent armies from getting to Paris because once you enter France, it's flat. It's very much like Poland. Like you will steamroll across them.
for the same reasons that Paris is key to capture if you're going to invade and take France, it's also very difficult to defend. It's
Hmm.
very easily accessible. It's very hard to
Yeah.
create a bottleneck where you can force your enemies to attack that, right? You kind of have to defend it on all in a bunch of different ways, and it's kind of a pain in the ass,
It's
right?
also the fact that that Paris used to be super defendable. Paris used to be great because it was sitting on an island in the Seine River. I'm gonna keep mispronouncing it. I don't know how to say it. Um, but it
Same.
used to be on an island. But it has grown up so much now that that river is no longer a moat. It's now just a part of the city. It's very much like why the Thames. It's very much like the Thames River in London. So there are no defenses. Even modern walls had no effect. Look at Vikings, for example. Vikings managed to take Paris so quickly that the only way to get them to leave was that the Paris government had to pay them in silver. And that only incentivized the Vikings to keep coming.
Yep. Itanchi has a good point there. And by the way, hi, Itanchi.
Hi, Tenchi.
Says, and on that point, the hills in Ukraine are vital strategically, and the trees are windbreaks behaving to trenches.
Yeah,
In a
there's a
lot of ways, we've got World War One repeating itself in some
Hmm.
in Ukraine.
I was going to say, when you look at the battle for Poland leading up to World War II, there's a reason why you see the battles of like Hill 142 and Hill, 355, because there's nothing there. There's it's the breadbasket of Europe, but by being the
Right.
breadbasket of Europe, it is flat. Any hill was considered like necessary because that was the only way to see over the enemy.
All right, that's really important, and we're going to get into more strategic assets when we get back. But in the meantime, we're going on a break mostly because I have to take a bio, and I'm going to track down Jamie's phone and kill it.
Uh,
So,
And I'm gonna grab some coffee, and
15
I'm gonna
minutes.
actually look 15 minutes.
okay, we'll see you in a few minutes,
Y'all
guys.
are awesome. I hope I'm not being too distracting.
Nope.
Oh, oh, you're
Yeah,
being perfect, man.
thanks. I'm trying to provide an equal amount of historical and fantasy
Hmm.
because I love Powder Mage, but for the fact that there's like a whole book and a half of just the field marshal running around in enemy territory just made me go, why? Why is he there? He needs to be leading the army. What the fuck? But yeah, no. Very few people understand that the fall of Paris is the fall of France.
The mics are still hot,
Yeah.
Sparkles, just so you know. You're talking
Yeah.
to everyone right now.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, you're
Can
all awesome and amazing.
you're allowed to keep talking though.
Yeah.
No,
Yep.
that's all I had to say. Um, I would really like to get into like why wars start because I have a few things written down on that.
We already did.
We already did, or we tried to.
I
We
feel like
kept.
well, no, I wanted to
Sorry.
get into like I wanted to get more into like casus bellis and like how they get
Hmm.
ready and whatnot. And I'll bring that up later because um there are wars that are declared, and then there are wars that are enacted, and they're not the same thing. Hey, Moon, we're done with this. Can you help me out with something?
What?
I said, when we're done with this, can you help me out with something?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I have this article I'm working on for the Call of Cthulhu world I'm working on, and I've gone through this thing like over and over, but for some reason it still says that there's a coding error causing the sidebar to be at the bottom of the page, and I do not know where it is.
Add me to the world. I will go through it while
Okay,
we're talking because I'm really here to keep you guys on track.
all right. I thought I had already. Maybe I. Oh no, wait. I think I got to like that final crucial step of adding you. Do you want to be editor?
Editor has to be. I have to be the editor to see the article that you have. So yes.
Okay. How do I add you again? In settings?
No, I'll send you a screenshot.
Okay. Riveting commentary for everyone. Oh wait, found it. And you're just Moonflower Rider.
Actually, I think
Sent via your PMs, my username.
Thank you. All right. Oh, that's why. I think I put Moonflower Rider, not Moonflower Writing.
Mm,
That's probably it. Because
probably.
it said it couldn't find Moonflower Rider. I'm like, what? But why not? They're there. They're
Mm.
alive. I'm talking to them unless they are a ghost.
I'm not a ghost. Thank you.
Descending into the crazies. I meant to go get coffee, and that never happened.
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Should be fixed now.
Oh, okay. What was it?
You are
Was
missing
it?
a slash call.
Was I? Oh, I bet I deleted it by accident.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
What do you think of the new layout? I was trying to keep it from being like really, really long in all the districts, but I also wanted to be eye catching.
It is eye catching.
I wanted to be eye catching but easy to read, I should say.
Hmm.
Sorry, we were talking about helping me fix something that I broke on my article.
Yeah, I figured that. No worries.
So I have to ask Sable, outside of your own
Mhm.
series, what's your favorite war fiction book?
I really love the Aubrey that the Master and Commander movie.
Oh yeah, that one's a good one.
Uh, Lord of the
Uh,
Rings. They're awesome.
yeah, I mean I've been reading His Majesty's Dragon, which is
Oh yeah, that's a
mwah,
great series too. Naomi Kovic.
Novak.
Novak. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she's great. Not as good on some of the details of war and logistics as some, but
Well,
really good at the command structure and politics.
I do love though that there are scenes that explain like how to feed a dragon because like
Oh
that is
yeah,
like
actually logistics she's pretty good at.
yeah
Yeah, pretty good at.
yeah
Another one that's really good for logistics is The Deed of Paxenarian by
ooh
Elizabeth Moon,
the
and
okay yeah
one that's really great for the intrinsic link to politics, and doing a space opera well as far as that goes. The Vorkosigan Saga by Lois with Master Bujold, and for how technology affects warfare, David Weber's Honor Herring. Those are some of my favorites. Yeah.
wait, I have to tell people this because this is really important. So I have talked to a few people who have actively served um, throughout my life, and I have to say, if you are going to name your character and you're going to make them a soldier, do not give them a kick-ass nickname because the military and the people in the military are not going to provide them that kick-ass nickname. They're going to go off of the most obvious trait of that person, and they are going to nail it to them. So, like, as much as I love hearing kick-ass nicknames, uh, the military does not give you a kick-ass nickname. There's a reason why every big guy in the military is called Tiny.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
they're going to mock you relentlessly, but it's okay because they will also die for you.
Yep. Yep. That's a truism. That's a real thing. Yes.
So yeah, that's just another thing. Like if you're going to name a soldier and give them a nickname, do not give them like, oh yeah, I am the blade of the blade of Karsagar. It's like no, there's a reason why like even on Edge of Tomorrow, they called her the Full Metal Bitch.
Yeah. Monarchs get those names. Soldiers
Yeah,
don't. I'll be
no,
right back.
It was a great movie.
it is a great movie. And they actually cover military stuff really well in that movie. But yeah, like I've nailed that in my brain. Like if I'm gonna make a soldier character, I can't give them a kick ass nickname because um that's like because the only reason they'd have that is if they gave that to themselves. The military would mock them relentlessly on that. It's a reason why the mages in my world are actually called wet sleeves or
Yep.
wet blankets.
The Honor Harrington. That's her given.
You
But
broke up
yeah,
there.
I get
You
your
broke up
point.
there, Sable. Sorry.
Honor Harrington is her name, not her nickname.
Yeah,
By the way, that is her given name, like Grace. You know,
Grace O'Malley.
right? Honor. That's her
Yeah.
first name. I'll bop in and or out and in if I'm breaking up. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay.
But but yeah, yeah, no. Soldiers will not give you the kick-ass nickname, and if you give yourself the kick-ass nickname, they will mock you relentlessly.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
you'll never live it down.
It's
That is why in Game of Thrones, We are not taking our nicknames. We are getting them.
Yep.
Yes, and you get them whether they're kick-ass or ridiculous or not.
There's a
Yes.
reason why, as a person who likes to go by Barbarossa Sparklebeard, I prefer to go by Barbie. Just like as a yeah,
Yeah, we know.
it would happen it's gonna happen inevitably. Apparently, holy shit, the deeds of Paxinarian is now in the Warner Brothers has the film rights to that as of 2019.
Oh,
Oh, good for Elizabeth Moon. I'm glad she sold the movie rights to someone. God, I hope they do a decent job of it because
I mean, Warner Brothers is good at regular movies. They suck at like DC. No offense to Warner Brothers, but the DC extended universe was a mess.
yes.
But they have done pretty good on a lot of other movies, so I'm excited to see and hear about it. Oh, these are actually fairly recent books too. I shouldn't say fairly recent. I mean, I'm seeing some from 2010, but also 1988.
I'm afraid that I share your opinion, Tempest. I am sure they're probably going to fuck it up.
Yeah,
I've
it's
not
Warner
read Tanya
Brothers.
Huff's Valor series yet. It's on my list of things to read.
Yeah, no. Yeah, Warner Brothers has had a pretty faulty track record with the last few movies. I think
I'm
they
ready
should.
to go anytime you are, by the way, babe, just so you know.
I'm
Okay.
ready whenever.
Well, we're taking a 15-minute break, so we got one more minute left.
If that's the case, I'm
Oh,
gonna quickly
okay.
run and go get iced coffee. BRB.
Okay.
hey, Mel, what are you doing? Getting stuck. That's what I'm doing. Alright, gang, then I will leave you because I am going to bed soon.
That is
Have a nice
totally
dream.
understandable. Thanks, Nat. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, that.
I'll give you a shout out here as you're on your way out.
Bye. Alright, bye bye.
Bye bye. Okay, are we ready?
Yeah, just give me a quick second. Are we ready? Okay. And we're back.
And we're back. Yes. Okay. So back to my camera. All right. So we were discussing strategic assets. Just to make it clear, there was a little bit of confusion going on there. A hill in a field, no matter how much you need it to see around you, is not a strategic asset. It's a tactical asset. That's how you're going to win the war in that particular battle, in that particular field, or any battles that might come, taking the hill, seeing what you can see, right? Your strategic assets are the things that if you lose them, the war is over. And if the enemy, if you lose them, the war is over. That's what your strategic assets are, right? The things you absolutely have to protect. One of the reasons why Paris is really important is because yes, you can get access to the whole country that way. That's one of the reasons why it's a strategic asset. But the other reason is that the seat of power in France is perceived as being in Paris. It has been in Paris forever. The person who holds Paris is thought to hold France because people are aware of this access that holding Paris provides, right? So the person who is in Paris is in charge.
There's also a really important thing to note that when you have a power structure, there is the possibility that if your capital falls, you will have a power structure in exile. This happened with
Yes,
Britain being in Canada, and this happened with the French monarch being, or the French government acting in Britain. Um, they are not visibly in the country, but they're still able to give orders. They're still able to enact laws. They're still able to do everything. The problem is they just cannot be in their country. It is no longer safe.
yes. Monarchies, the strategic asset is often the monarch and their heirs, right? This has been true since like and why, right? Why do you need to have the monarch and the heirs? Because that is how you establish the legitimacy of the, nation, tribe, clan, whatever, right? But also that is how you make another army, right? Like if your monarch is dead, the army and their heirs are dead, the soldiers aren't gonna listen, right? You
Let's
either have to convince the army that you have more legitimacy, right? Or
mhm.
that the legitimacy has transferred to you, right? Or you have to completely destroy the other monarch, and that's you know that might not even guarantee anything, right?
So one of my favorite quotes comes after the French Revolution.
Yes.
A French revolutionary said that the greatest point of instability is never during wartime, but it's afterwards. He
Mm,
said this in the aftermath of the French Revolution because they were uncertain what state the country was going to be in afterwards. And this is true with most wars. World War I saw the greatest instability in Europe, and that was after one of the most devastating wars because now the countries had to come together as they had in 1812 to work out where are the borders now.
yeah, yeah. This is why in Game of Thrones they were trying to kill all the Targaryens,
Yeah,
including the smallest baby, right? You
for
have
sure.
to,
There's no heirs.
because otherwise the Targaryens will be perceived as having the greater legitimacy because they were rulers of all the nine kingdoms, right?
Hmm.
If the Targaryens are all gone, then it goes back to an older um, perspective, which is that each of the kingdoms ruled their own independently,
The
right?
great the crown and the act of holding power has such a huge morale behind it. There's a reason why in a lot of fiction, like The Man in the High Castle, when they nuked Washington D.C. and New York, a lot of the nation in that world went, "Oh shit." Like they did not know what to do because now our economy is gone and our leaders are gone.
Yes, those are significant strategic assets for the United States. The president and the government, right? And your financial capital, right?
Hmm.
And that is why the terrorists in the planes went for the World Trade Center and the Pentagon,
Hmm.
right? Strategic assets. They had limited forces. They knew if they got lucky, they might take out a couple of them, and that's what they tried to do. Unfortunately, they failed in the third strategic asset. Well, okay, they failed to take out the military asset, and
Hmm.
they, although they did get the financial one at the time, right?
Yeah.
And they failed to take out the command structure asset, right? If they had managed all three, they might have actually succeeded, right? That was their
Hmm.
only hope.
But the but
In
like
can I've been trying to get to a couple of examples here,
yeah,
and then by all means fill it in because this is important, right?
thumbs
Um,
up.
in Game of Tomes, the strategic asset is the house leader and their direct in command, which used to be the heirs but is now the seneschals, right? Without those, we found this, by the way, it's a wonderful microcosm of war. If a house leader is eliminated in Game of Thrones, the house identity generally falls apart. So those are your strategic assets. You have to protect them in order to build another army or feel like the house has an identity. This is why we instituted the bodyguard, so that people would have a way of doing that. And it would not be bad for morale. We find it's very bad for house's morale when you lose a house leader, right? In the world of Game of Thrones, this is why the Lapin forces were willing to die to a man to protect the crashed plane that carried the forgelings in Okanagan Lake, right? Because honestly, the strategic asset that was there was mostly Jellybean, right? Because Jellybean is a were rabbit, and therefore she is in line to inherit the Lapin throne. You must be a were rabbit to inherit the Lapin throne, right? This is one of Sable's children, but all of the Millie's children were an asset, and the Millie's family a strategic asset, because without her children, as Sable had already lost what, 3 by that point, 4, right? The queen was breaking. If the queen breaks, you have no army. We have to protect those children, and that's why they were willing to sacrifice so many to save so few. Loyalty is part of it, right? The soldiers in an army generally swear to the monarch, not the prime minister. I want to make that clear, even in a constitutional monarchy, right? In Canada, the troops swear to the queen, or now the king, right? They do not swear to Mr. Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau has no command whatsoever over the military, right? And that's a key point, right? So there's loyalty there, right? I made an oath. I'm going to keep it. Such things are very important to soldiers. Codes of honor are very important to soldiers in wartime because it governs their actions and gives them motivation, right? So, yeah, it's the same in the UK, as James points out. Yes, absolutely, right? So, yeah, that's the strategic asset you have to protect. In-house Lapin, you need to protect the queen, right? And you need to protect the seneschals, if there are more, and the heirs, right? Those are the strategic assets. And that's the priority. So if you have to lose any, that's what you lose, right? Lives, it's really hard when we're talking about human lives, but if we're going to think about it on a broad scope, other examples in chess, the strategic asset is the king. If you do not protect the king, the game is over, right? In sports events, right? If we're playing any of the rugby derivatives, the strategic asset is the goal, and you have to protect that at all costs, right? The strategic asset, the thing you must protect. Sometimes it's a talisman, right? The holder of the iron axe of the orcs, right, is the king and the war chieftain. So the asset is the axe, man, right? It ain't the guy who holds it, you know? Think about what it is you have to protect. Yeah, and now Barbarossa, it's all yours.
I mean, just to build off of that, in my Wednesday Dragonlance game, the hammer of the dwarves, there are 9 different types of dwarves in this world. Whoever controls the hammer, not the person who controls it, but whoever controls the hammer itself, unites all the dwarves. So, but when we think about the importance of monarchy and the importance of leadership and the importance of goals, I mean, it's really important to know like how you do this. There's a reason that during the French Revolution, people didn't go after the king. They didn't go after the nobility. They went after key strategic outposts. The fall of the Bastille was the releasing of prisoners that had been wrongly removed. They went after nobles only when they had control because they did not want anyone to deny them their ability to do so. Um, so when we look into uh, important strategic goals, it's important to know like how are they important for your side and why are they important for the enemy? Because I could be with my 200 men defending this lumber mill, But if there's like 20 other lumber mills, me defending this one doesn't help me. Now, if it's the only one still standing, that's a totally different story.
Right. Rome's strategic asset was the city of Rome. Whoever held the city of Rome controlled Rome.
Yep.
Right. So that is what they had to defend. Everything else, they could lose it.
Mm-hmm.
No problem. They could rebuild.
Now, there are some instances where the idea of nation is actually more potent than a crown. One primary example is, I bet you didn't know this, the Kingdom of Belgium during World War One.
Tell me
The
more.
king, the king actually was taking part in active planning of campaigns. The queen was serving as an on-site triage nurse, which means that she was on the front lines. She was
Mhm.
able, and the prince was actively leading charges against the Germans because they believed that unless they were serving, they were the only noble family serving, by the way.
Mhm.
Um, that if they were not serving, they were not defending their country because
Sometimes you must lead from the front because the politics of your society dictate that. Yes.
Belgium has a very interesting history. In case you don't know, Belgium is very much this nation that has, like, we think of Belgium and the Low Countries as being this rather, small and old country, but the fact is they haven't been independent very long. They were owned by Spain and given freedom by Britain only about 200 years before World War One.
Okay.
So the idea of being free and liberating is a big thing to them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Right. In Game of Tomes, the house leaders fight on the battlefield. Why? Because the reason why they are the leaders of their various protectorates is because the populace in the aftermath of a zombie apocalypse went, holy shit, you guys have magic. We need you to protect us against the fucking zombies. Will you help? So their entire legitimacy is based on their ability to do their best to protect the populace. So you cannot have them locked in a castle. They have to be doing stuff to protect the people, right? They
And,
have to.
and to add on to that, just pointing this out, it's wrong to think that even in a medieval society that your king is just sitting in the castle twiddling his thumbs like, man, I really hope the war's going okay, because that's not what they do. The king, even if he's not an active military commander, he is the guy who is making sure logistics are flowing. The blood of the nation is flowing. They are passing laws, doing drafts. Like, if it's not showing up in your book, you have to ensure that there is some reference to this. Like, why
Yes.
isn't the king on the battlefield? Oh, because he's in such and such town. I'm part of a draft drive. Uh, because the king is the face of the country. There's a reason why his face is on all the fucking money.
You know, why isn't Queen Sable on the battlefield right now? Because she's currently at the Windy Willows negotiating a trade deal with House Millies so that we can get better access to grain. Oh, okay. Right.
What
Yeah.
what do you
That's the
what do
kind
you
of shit they might be doing. Yeah.
what do you think would be a much more powerful tool? Knowing that your king is in a hospital bed, bleeding out and dying, with no idea of what they're doing, or getting a video message from said hospital, the king being like, "Hey, I'm doing fine, and once I'm out of this, we're going to keep the fight going. We're going to keep being strong." Because little messages like that, little things of just knowing that the king is doing something, even if it's like not even directly associated with the battlefield, is great. There's a reason why in World War One soldiers loved Christmas, because not because of just the Christmas truce. They got pipes with the Queen's face on it. They got chocolates. They got stuff, little notes and stuff, little notes and letters that stated like, "Hey, everything's doing great over here. We miss you. We're hoping you have a great Christmas in the trenches with trench foot and disease and rifles being shot at you."
Yep. Absolutely.
Morale is super important.
Yeah, let's talk about morale. That's another valid point here, since we're on that subject. Hard pounding this gentleman. said the Duke of Wellington at Waterloo. Let us see who will pound the longest. Morale is everything, right? War continues until one side says, fuck this, we're done, right? The one who is willing to go the farthest is the one who mostly wins. I say that because there are conditions, right? If you're really overwhelmed and your only other choice is to die, right? And everybody dies and that's it, you might not do that, right? But because what are you fighting for, right? Are you what are the not only do you have to think about what the belligerents, the people in charge, are fighting about, right? You have to think about what is motivating the soldier to fight.
Mm-hmm.
A soldier is not going to go to war just for shits and giggles. They want something out of it. It's dangerous. Now, there could be a couple of different things. Maybe you're paying them, right? Maybe they're mercenaries, right? Maybe you're paying them and they're fighting for money. Hey,
Yeah.
you know what? You got to eat. Money is how you eat. Cool, right? But mercenaries traditionally don't have an incredible amount of loyalty to whoever it is they're serving. They're there for the money, right? You don't keep the money flowing. They don't give a fuck about you, right? They're not interested in that. We saw this, speaking of the whole situation in Ukraine, which Author Goddess touched on in the chat. And this is why we had mercenaries marching on Moscow. It hadn't been paid. If you're going to hire mercenaries, you have to keep them paid, because otherwise they just might decide to take their wages out of you.
Yeah.
So there's a thing, right? And this is part of why nations do so much to build up the virtue of patriotism, right? Because a soldier who believes they're fighting for the right reasons is far more likely to do it to the end. One of the problems that is plaguing the Russians in the current war is that they have two different policies, right? The Ukrainians and the Russians. The Ukrainian policy, when they were starting the war, right? Um, no, Conquest, I will disagree with you and I'll argue that point in a minute, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. But awesome. Hello, good to see you.
Conquest.
Um, okay. Uh, one of the very first things the Ukrainians received in training, right, was how to, like, everybody's got basic first aid.
Yep.
Everybody is trained with basic first aid. Everybody can bandage a wound, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they get their wounded off the battlefield and
Mm-hmm.
get them home if they can, because they're fighting for each other. They're fighting for their homeland. They're fighting for their people. They're fighting for their families, right? So if you bring, it seems like a waste of resources to bring your people off the field. Often people will get killed trying to retrieve the wounded and all that sort of thing. Why do you do it? Because it's really important to morale. If people are protecting each other and believe there's something they can do, if the other soldier who's fighting next to them gets hurt, right, then they have a reason to keep going. The Russians have an opposite attitude, right? Jamie was pointing out a newscast he was watching where there was like drones over Moscow or something, so there was a delay getting the wounded into Moscow
ADM.
from a battle. Hey, Stretch, right? The delay was, so what they did is all the wounded were disembarked from the plane and put out on the tarmac.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, all the wounded were disembarked from the plane, right, and put out on the tarmac, right? Now, they were all walking wounded. That means that they left the guys who were seriously wounded there, right? That's what that means. There was no survivors of gut shots. They
Mm-hmm.
were left to die, right? It's a difference in philosophy. The Russians have a belief that the group is more important than the individual. The cause is more important than, the specific needs. So they will not spend the military resources to try to rescue someone who is going to be very difficult to deal with anyway, right? They will leave the seriously wounded on the battlefield and only retrieve them if they have the luxury, right? And they'll wait till after the fight. While it's more of a Western trained philosophy that we will, like, U.S. Marines will not even leave their dead behind.
Banhammer.
Ben Hammer, you stretch out an opportunity to hit someone today. I'm sure he's pleased. This is good.
Can I bring up another point similar to that?
Yeah. Thanks,
So
Tempest.
so there is a reason why in World War I the shotgun was considered a war crime and not gas. Because everyone makes the joke that how could the Germans, call the U.S. the shotgun a war crime when they were using chemical weapons. Chemical weapons don't necessarily kill you unless they're in huge, huge amounts. Um, and even then, you can quote unquote recover from them, if that makes sense. You're out for a little bit. But with a shotgun blast, that doesn't necessarily kill you. And if it doesn't, you're in for a hell of a time because now you don't have just one doctor treating you for gas burns, blindness, burnt lungs. You have three people pulling out little bits of BB out of you, and that's three people dying now. There's four people dying now rather than one person dying now. You're pulling people
Yeah.
off the line, and that was a huge thing to the Germans because the Germans were losing the war at this point. They were out of medical supplies, they were out of resources, they were out of, and they were looking for any 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 like help. And the shotgun, which let me tell you this, had no stopping the firing pin. So literally, if you held the trigger and went boom, 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 there's a reason it was called the trench sweeper. They saw that as a like that's a big no no. That
Yeah.
is a big no no.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so another thing you can do, right? It is occasionally an effective strategy, right? Um, if your troops are more afraid of you than they are of the enemy, they might keep fighting a really long time. This has worked through history, right? We've seen all kinds of examples in regimes. The early Chinese emperors were particularly famous for this, right? Do I believe that's as effective a strategy as everybody there is fighting for their home and their people and their family and each other? No, I don't believe that. I ultimately think that we'll fight harder if the things we care about are threatened. So we have to give them a reason to care. You can push it too far with the fear strategy, by the way.
Hmm.
Um, uh, I think Sun Tzu gives an example himself of a situation where there's, a bunch of soldiers ended up getting separated from their unit, and they knew that they were going to be charged with desertion and shot. Well, not shot in a time, actually, executed, right? They knew they were going to be executed. And so they went, you know what? Fuck it, and then we're going to get executed anyway. And they went and organized a coup. Right? If you scare your if everything results in death, right? And keep this in mind for your Dark Lords. If everything results in death and there's no reward for doing anything positive, eventually people are just going to go, you know what? Fuck it. I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. I'm going to try to kill the motherfucker, and somebody's going to succeed, right?
Another example of this would honestly be the Japanese in World War II. They hit Pearl Harbor. They destroyed basically the entire American Pacific Fleet. They did the Bataan death marches. They tortured and killed thousands of people. It was almost like a genocide throughout the Pacific Islands. But did that scare anyone? No, it pissed everybody off. There's such a thing as doing things too much, and there's a reason why when you look at propaganda, everyone kind of looks the same in that really old-fashioned racist cartoon way, because that's how they saw them. Every Japanese person was the same, and I mean it's not wrong, it's not right, but it's this it's the mentality of how you face a threat like that. It's very easy for you to demonize someone if quote unquote everyone is doing it.
Right. And this is one of the reasons why we have rules of engagement and things like the Geneva Convention, is to prevent shit like that. But
Hmm.
okay. Um yeah, I was going to address the Spartans.
Yeah.
The Spartans had a perception that they were undefeatable. The minute somebody defeated them, that was it. Right? So the reason why they were willing to make the incredible sacrifices that they were is that their identity, their strategic asset was then the army itself, the Spartans, right? Protecting that asset and its perception of being undefeatable, right? That was the asset. So that is what they had to protect, that perception, right? Um, so yeah, that's why they were willing to do that. It's not, it's not that they were, gung ho to die or anything, right? Nobody's gung ho to die. Nobody's gung ho to kill each other either. This is another point, right? Come home with your shield or carry it on it. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. That's exactly the philosophy there, right? Okay, so yeah, nobody wants to kill each other either.
Sorry about that.
I've read a really great book here. Just a second. I forgot to grab it off my shelf this morning. I will do that. I'm just going to reach over, but I got to detach these. Okay, and I'll grab a couple other books. Mention while I'm at it. Okay. Okay, this book, On Killing, by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, right? He writes about, like, he himself is a soldier, right? A former Army Ranger and paratrooper. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman taught psychology at West Point and is currently West Point, if you haven't heard of it, major military school of prestige. Okay, right, and currently the professor of military science at Arkansas State University. Right. Now, I don't agree with everything he says in the book, and granted, I do not have a fraction of his education, but um, there's all kinds of research here that says that people will try to avoid killing each other at all costs. They did things like the thing that struck me the most with this book, right, is that he talked about how in the American Civil War, right, people have done the archaeological studies into the American Civil War, and they've dug up battle sites and all this stuff. Okay, you know how all the weapons were muzzle loaders. um this is actually Sparkle's area of expertise. He can probably confirm this for me. They found several of these muzzleloader weapons that had like 10 balls stuffed in them.
Hmm.
Because how war worked, right, was that you formed a line because nobody had any method of protecting each other against these new firearms that were so dangerous, right? And they marched them towards each other. The command was to level the firearm as a group, fire, just not aim, just fire it at the enemy, keep walking as they're loading, do it again, right? That was basically, there's cannons and shit that, kind of change that balance, but that's mostly what was going on, right? So instead of firing, what these guys were doing were they were loading the weapon, pointing it at the enemy and not shooting, right? And then they load another one and not shoot. People really don't want to kill each other. There's in exercises, you can hit everything on target and then you expose your troops to the enemy, and there's a statistically huge number of shots going wide. People like jerking the
Yeah, you
trigger
sort of got to be a
nearly at the last minute.
psychopath to kill someone.
Yeah, people don't want to kill people.
There's a reason why a lot of militaries ask for young men,
Hmm.
um, because the whole
They're
point of military
stupider.
basic training is they're stupider, but they're young enough that you can break down whatever identity they've constructed and they can
Hmm.
mold it into what they want. There's a reason why a lot of militaries do not ask for 35, 45-year old men, because at that point you've established your brain, because at 18 your brain is still malleable. Your brain is still, you can still, you know, be change, but by around 45, you're pretty much set in your ways.
One of the reasons why the movement, okay, one of the reasons why post traumatic stress
Hmm.
started to become such a thing is because there was so much killing and so much death. And we have started training people since the beginning of the 20th century to do it without thinking about it. Right? It's just part of this is part of what Colonel Grossman brings up in his book, right? Lieutenant Colonel Grossman. He we're training them to disconnect the action. We're training them to use muscle memory to do whatever the thing it is that
Hmm.
requires the killing of people, right? So it becomes automatic, and that way we're not, we just do it when we're trained to do it, and that's important. That's necessary for survival, but it also means there's a lot more actual death in many cases than there used to be in a direct battlefield, and like face on. Not deaths happened after. I'll tell you about that in a minute. It's not to say people didn't die, sometimes in the millions, but um literally, right?
They
But
usually
I'm
weren't
not
killed.
exaggerating, right? But we really, our technology has changed the way they've done it. And this is part of why in recent years we have done as much as possible to depersonalize war, right? We teach people it's a video game. We train them how to use the video game type controllers. And when a lot of professions, trades as they call them in the military, you get there, and a lot of them basically you're just using your game controllers because they want it to be automatic, and they want you to depersonalize the enemy and not realize what you're, the full effects of what you're doing. And this seems horribly immoral and in many ways, but it's also necessary. Okay. Poor Moon. I'm sorry, Moon is sick.
Well,
Mm.
The guns that have multiple bullets loaded in them. Imagine if fire it, scatter shot. Yeah, that would be ugly.
So
James has a question. He says, Game of Thrones related. If the second and third in command were with Sable and I was with the fourth and they got injured, would it be seen as heroic for me returning the fourth to our safe medics? No, because your job is to protect Sable. If you abandon your post, Sable is unprotected. Do your job, let somebody else do their job.
yeah, in that case, you would actually have someone of a subordinate, basically like your aide de camp, leading the medical retreat like that. You would basically you have to be the stalwart, the wall. Like you are like you're focused on advancing. You have to have someone else focus on the medical retreat. Um, I was gonna say another interesting thing is the the transformation of military technology is always huge. It's never small things. It's never like whenever military technology advances, it's normally going to be during a war, and it's normally going to be a huge difference. One of the biggest things that I can think of was the invention of the Dreiss needle gun by Germany. They
Right.
actually they have this in the movie Bismarck. It's a German movie. I actually recommend it. It's great. Where they were showing off the Dreiss needle gun, and they had it going up against a musket. And by the time that the guy had fired, loaded his musket, fired again, loaded his musket, fired again 5 times, the Dreiss needle gun, which I should point out is a very early version of a bolt action rifle, had fired 15 times.
Rabbit,
And I
rabbit,
should note
rabbit,
the
rabbit,
soldier that
rabbit,
was leading
rabbit, rabbit,
was someone
rabbit,
who was
rabbit,
trained
rabbit, rabbit,
and
rabbit,
did this
rabbit,
training
rabbit,
separately.
rabbit, rabbit.
Tempest, if you have a coffee maker, when you put the coffee in the coffee maker, put a teaspoon of salt in with it.
Mm-hmm.
It'll not only take
Always.
the bitter out of your coffee, right? It will add the salt to your diet.
Yeah, I was gonna say I do that with my fruit coffees because it takes the
Yeah,
bitter out and it leaves it nice and sweet and
yeah.
fruity. But yeah, no. Another prime example is the invention of the synchronization gear, not the airplane, because we had airplanes for a while, and the idea of air combat was nothing new. We had used observation balloons since the Civil War, so
Mhm.
Air flight was nothing new. The idea of a synchronization gear was huge because before the synchronization gear, pilots would have to carry a bandolier of pistols, much like old fashioned pirates with flintlocks,
Yes.
and they would fight that way. The synchronization gear, you now had a gun that was on the front of your plane, and you no longer had to worry about blowing off your own propeller unless you broke the synchronization gear, in which case you're fucked.
Yep. Yep. That
But
that
like
really is very important, actually.
the synchronization gear was so important that the entire 2.5 months the Germans had it before the British was literally called Bloody April. It was,
Mhm.
yep, it was so devastating. The British could not fly at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. This brings us to the next area to consider when you're fighting your war. Three things dictate how a war is fought: terrain,
Hmm.
technology, and
Hmm.
culture.
You could call it the three T's: terrain, technology, tradition.
Tradition. Yeah, that you can. Is it? Did you read Spin Put,
I
or
read
did you
some.
just come up with that?
I just came up with that based on what you said.
Sure, I love that. Actually, yes. Terrain, technology, tradition. What's the battlefield? You're gonna have a fight. There's a very different war, like because wars are a series of fights and
Hmm.
conflicts and intelligence and counterintelligence and all this stuff. Okay, what's the battleground overall, right? Um, is the battleground an entire planet? You're going to need to think about how different areas of the war are going to be fought depending on parts of that planet. One
I
of the
mean,
ways
they.
one
I
of
was
the
gonna
ways in which people look at the world wars is that they look at them in terms of theaters. You'll hear the discussion of the Pacific theater.
Yep.
That's the war in the Pacific, right? Because that's fought very differently than the European theater, which is a
Hmm.
land battle, right? And several land battles. Go ahead, Barbarossa.
You're
Yeah.
actually recovering the point that I was going to state. I mean, like, not only that, but theaters are super well defined. This is how important terrain is. The reason why trenches were used in French and German battles is because the land was flat. There was no defense. So they had to have these ridge lines, these trenches to defend them. This was a totally different than when you went to the Eastern Front in Russia, which was, just across Germany, because there was mountains. Looking at the Eastern Front in World War I would be very much looking at like World War II. Everyone's moving. Train lines are important because there are no roads, and you'd have to keep moving. There were no trenches on the Eastern Front, and so when you're thinking about battles, terrain is super important because of that fact, because it changes how you fight. It could be a stagnant battle or a constantly moving battle.
And it'll also change what your tactical goals become, right?
Hmm.
Like Sparkles was talking about, with every hill is important when you're fighting on a plane, right? Those are all significant because it's the only place where you can see what the hell is going on for miles and miles, right? When you're fighting a battle on the ocean, it's if you're fighting a battle, okay, if you're fighting a war for about the ocean as a whole, you need to control the equator,
Hmm.
right? Because that is your best chance to move freely around the planet through the water. And you need to protect even, ridiculous little islands that you've never heard of because they're key landing and resupply points, right? This is one reason why writers of, say, military science fiction space opera think often have space navies as opposed to an air force. Like, why would you do that, right? It's
Hmm.
because you have to think about the terrain in a very similar way. Planets are little islands of life and little ports in a vast hostile environment. So every planet becomes important. If you're talking about a war where, in a world where the available terrain is wormholes to get from system to system, every wormhole access becomes a significant tactical asset that you must defend, and in some cases can be a strategic asset. This is a point that Lois McMaster Bujold brought up very effectively in her Vorkoskan Saga series.
Hmm.
In this series, the Baryarans, who are sort of culturally Russian ish, right? Were a planet that was backward in its technology because its main wormhole access, gravity waves shifted as different planets moved and they got cut off from the rest of the explored space for like a couple hundred years, right? And then the wormhole between them opened back up, and a people called the Setagandans thought, hey, we're going to come in there, we're going to take their shit because, hey, they're a nice, easy slave population to exploit, right? So they went in, and for a while they were kicking the absolute shit out of the Baryarans, but they're culturally Russian, man. So they went into a scorched earth policy, right? Climbed and fought a guerrilla warfare in the hills, stole the technology of the Setagandans, used it against them, and eventually managed to get over and drive them out of space. And then they went to the place that the wormhole came from, which was a planet called Komar, that had not a goddamn thing to do with any of this, except that it had been a staging point for Setagandans and happened to be at the nexus of several wormholes and took it over too. And the reason why they did that is so that they could guard that one wormhole area into Baryaran space. And yes, this was an unjust action, but strategically, they had no choice. They had to defend that one point, which I think is marvelous that Bujold gives us that whole picture politically and makes us understand why sometimes war has what looks like terrible immoral actions, right?
On a smaller scale, going back to my previous example of James
Mm-hmm.
McNeese, James McNeese, when he landed with his Dirty Dozen, which I should note that when he fought this battle, it was more like 35, and this is 35 people of the U.S. Air Force that had, or Army Air Force, airborne troops. They
Right.
basically rounded up together because, as we know, the landing of Normandy Beach was a mess. I mean, we won it, but getting there was kind of a mess. Anyway, he has 35 men, and he is approached by 700 Germans at this bridge. This man managed to not only defeat the 700, but he also managed to take out 2 tanks by fortifying this bridge position with just his
Right.
35 guys. Having control of your terrain and having such things as like a high ground, a moat, little things will do exponentially good things. Just as it's
Yes.
always stated, famously in Star Wars, I have the high ground. Fuck you.
Yeah, the reason why we have the space treaty is because anybody in space right now has the high ground on the damn planet, right?
And no one wants us dropping rods from God.
No, no, we don't need that. We don't need that.
Yep,
So,
and DM Stretch points it out Agincourt, where
yes.
and here's the thing: no matter what happens in war, and going back to my previous technology thing, no matter what happens in war, you will have the advantage. But if you're fighting a significant power that is equal to you, you will not have that advantage long. I have the cavalry. We are the cavalry. Well, in 1 or 2 months, the opponents now have pole arms. They're going to figure out your strategy and do everything to reverse it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd start in 3 minutes, so let me know. Okay, I'm gonna keep an clock here.
Yep.
All right. I don't want people to miss anything, right? Yes. Terrain, right? If you can force your enemy to attack you at a choke point, then even a very small force can hold off a very large one. Like the 300 scenario, right? In order to, in the movie anyway, it is very loosely based on some actual history stuff. Don't take it seriously.
Oh, just to answer James' question, rods from God is basically big old tungsten rods dropped from space, and then using gravity rather than rockets to just slam into targets. It's not ideal simply because you cannot control them once you drop them, but they are effective because you can't stop them once they're dropped.
Yeah.
Hands of God.
Yeah, and they have the power of God and anime on their side.
Okay, let me know when the ad starts so I can shut up. But okay, so the 300, right? In the mythical story there, the Persians had to cross this pass in order to successfully attack Sparta. So even a small force can defend a single pass if that's where people have to go in order to attack you. There is a reason why Hannibal made use of elephants, right? And that was because he was seeking a way to attack an, a point that people did not expect, overland, right? As opposed to oversea. Um, Hello, Daz, and hey, Kit, welcome back. Yeah, I think we must be in the ads now, or at least we're really close. So I'm going to take a momentary break here
I'm
to
not
give
seeing
the
any
ads a
ad
chance to
warning.
run.
I'm not seeing any ad warning.
I thought I did. Well, I'll carry on then for a minute. Okay.
She'd be a bunny.
I mean, it is kind of my totem spirit. There's
Yeah.
reasons why. Yeah. To answer Callie's question.
Me, I am a dog in both heart, mind, and spirit. I'm easily excitable and prone to distraction.
Wolf says, says stretch, which we know.
I
Yes.
can see that.
Stoked. Apparently, everybody has honestly picked their associated Game of Tomes animals, which is cool. Off to draw some werewolves. Okay, you bet there, Aegis. I was just about to address your point about terrain is also resources, right? Just before you go, right? Yes, because terrain also includes things like, you know, if you're foraging, it includes the forage. It could include your, for your farmland. It could include things like, where you're mining the stuff that you need, right? Like one of the reasons why Rome bothered to spend so much fucking effort on Britain, because I mean, like think about the location and the
Tin.
logistics of this, right? Like how to manage this, the distance you'd have to travel. Yeah, go ahead, babe.
Tin.
Tin.
That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tin.
Because there's not a lot of it in the world. Oh, ad break ends in a minute and a half.
Okay. We're going to take a small break to let the ads run. I'm going to shut the camera off for a minute, maybe take a bio. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Mushroom.
I'm having a lot of fun with this.
Uh,
I'm glad you guys had me on. I'm sorry if I'm being a bit distracting.
No, you're not. Not at
Sweet.
all.
Okay, I'm back. Are we done our ads?
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, what we are doing today. Hi, Darcy. What we are doing is how to plan your writers and game masters. Things you need to know when you are planning a war in your story and why you need to know. Good night, Jane. Sleep well.
Good night, James.
So, can I just kind of go off on a weird tangent with war, if I may?
Um,
Or-
depending. How long are we going to be doing it?
Well, I wanted to kind of talk about the difference between declaring war and enacting war.
Oh, sure. Let's get into that as soon as we finish covering the basics of the three T's, as you put
Got
it,
it.
right? Terrain, technology,
And
tradition,
tradition.
right? Okay, so we've done a lot of discussion about the importance of terrain, right? The
Hmm.
the battlefield dictates the conflict, right? Technology also dictates the conflict
Hmm.
because the ways in which you attack each other is going to depend on the available tech that you have, right? The thing is, war is expensive. You have to have, well, okay, you're better off having prepared for ahead of time. What you've got is what you've got when you start fighting. You may not be able to build more of it. So you need to kind of have an idea and how to use. A change in technology can shift the process of a war at any time. And that's why arms races are always important. People are always trying to get something that counters the tech of the other guy. And then there's becomes counters and counters to the tech. Barbarossa, tell us all about how the building of changed warfare.
Building of what?
The Bismarck.
Ah, so the Bismarck is possibly one of the most ridiculous things that came. So you see, after World War One, there were limits put on boats and how many planes and how many standing troops you could have. And because of this, a lot of European powers had not actually developed new technology. Entering into World War II, it was not uncommon to see biplanes still, because that's just what people had. They were throwing what they had. The Bismarck, however, was a totally different story. We're talking a huge battleship that could hit anything from 15 miles away, which is insane when you think about it, competing to the British, which I believe could only go like 7 miles at most. I think it was only like half the distance. The Bismarck fired tree trunk sized shells. This thing destroyed the hood, which was the British. The how do I put this? The the British destroying the hood was like destroying the English crown. The hood had served prominently in World War One. It had been a huge asset, and in two shots, the Bismarck destroyed this. The Bismarck was such a huge thing when it came to the German Navy that there's a reason Winston Churchill, or as I like to call him, the man who threw troops away at Gallipoli, like he threw scraps off his plate, um, ordered the entire British Army, Navy, and Air Force to sink this boat because they did not know how they could sink it. And there are debates on this. I personally do not think the British sank it. I think mechanical failures caused by being hit too much caused it to sink. And while you're like, well, that just means the British sank it. Like, no, I don't think the British could actually I don't think the British could actually pierce this thing. I think that just by
Mhm.
hammering this thing so much, things in the engine room, things in the war magazine, all of this caused it to blow itself up. I don't think the British had the technology to actually take out the Bismarck. They just got fucking lucky.
Stretch agrees with you. He says yes. Experts still can't agree on exactly how the hood was destroyed in just two salvos.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we're talking about the Bismarck, right? Stretch also points out the Russian night witches using biplanes in World War II. Yeah, really good story there. Yeah, we're going to get into some of the myths of war.
Yep.
And why they are bullshit. We'll do that later. But one of my big rants, I'm getting on top of my soapbox. Women have always been part of war, you fucking sexist morons. And history proves it. There's way, way, way too much data now that proves it beyond a doubt. Anybody who says otherwise is jerking off to a power fantasy of some kind. It is not true that women were not part of war and that they were not soldiers. We've been around here forever, guys. Sorry. And I'm really tired of getting into arguments with in particular American men about this, right? I'm really sick of it. Really tired. Do not even go at me with this. Yeah.
Another thing that's personally on my soapbox, because I have the woman's soapbox as well, but Sable defended it much more. Just because you have the biggest and best equipment doesn't mean you're the biggest and best army. We have seen far too many times in history that, like what Stretcher just mentioned, the Night Witches were the most tactically successful unit in World War II. Did they have metal planes? Did they have the best equipment? No, they were going at it with handheld bombs in biplanes that made so little noise they were called sewing machines because their engines were quieter than sewing machines. Not only that, but one of the best British fighters and bombers was made entirely out of wood. It was basically a paper airplane with two V8 strapped to this thing, but it was the best thing that they had. So whenever I hear people like, "Oh yeah, my army has the best and brightest equipment," like that's great, but like no joke, the army had an AI that they considered the best, and 15 Marines managed to outsmart it with a cardboard box because they identified how Marines could move, so they just covered themselves with a box. And they moved right up to it. It didn't recognize it as movement because it didn't look like a human person.
Probably a valuable point too. People fight with the technology they've got, and the minute you change the technology, you change the entire battle, right? And the entire scope of the war, right? People are making a lot of good points. You know what? One day I will do an entire stream just on this, guys. Women
and
in
I will
war.
be there to help. The women in war. Women in war.
Yeah.
Hell, Joan of Arc. Just saying that right off the bat.
You know what? In the history of Vietnam, China, Japan, there are Korea, right? There are countless examples of important women who were military commanders and soldiers. It's
and if you
the Mongols, the men and women fought at each other's sides. Yeah, we could go on forever. One whole stream we're gonna.
Okay. And what? Just final note, just to throw it off the top there. And people, I've gotten in arguments with this, and they say, "Well, it's a non-European thing." To which I say, French Revolution. Women were leading the march. I mean, how do you know that? Hell, the Parisian Women's March happened before the French Revolution.
I got you there. I wrote about a battle, right? At what was it? It was either Belize or Toulouse. I don't remember now. I wrote a story that took place in this battle. Okay, right? This was people of the Languedocs, which was what is currently southern France, who were an independent nation at the time, were defending their city. Castles work, good technology, by the way, right? They're defending their city. They defeated the French. The historians of the people who were there at the time wrote women were manning the war machines, men were doing the direct face-to-face combat stuff because they had the training to do that. They won that battle. They liberated the city. The siege was ended. And historians that came after this time just completely ignored all the eyewitness accounts because they figured women couldn't possibly be fighting like. We know better than that. It is known, right? No. No. Okay. We're dropping this topic now because I could be on here forever, right? But
Same.
we will do an entire stream just about women at war, right? We'll give you all kinds of examples from different cultures, different experiences. Yeah, right. We'll cover the planet. We'll cover a bunch of different time periods. There's no shortage of women warriors. There never has been. Never. Okay. Um. So tell us, Barbarossa, about the ends of the Age of Sail. This is an example of technology changing warfare.
So, for the last 200 to 300 years, even longer than that, actually, we can even say up to 500, or even throughout most of human history, we had sail. And that was the primary thing that humans used to sail across the ocean. Then, the Americans hire a steel worker and a madman to put a steam engine in a boat. Oh, hey,
Yep.
Nick Flair, thanks for the raid. We're currently discussing war right now, and I'm going to tell you a hilarious story about boats. Um, so basically, what happened is a madman, an American, put metal on a boat, and when they went up against each other, something remarkable happened. Cannonballs could not pierce this shit. What
Yep.
was furthermore is that this, how do I put this? It could go anywhere. It was not reliant on wind and it wasn't reliant on sail. It
Yeah.
could go anywhere. And this quickly, like even during the Civil War, Europeans saw this and they were like, we need to do this. The problem was every other country in the world, which had been a huge empire at the time, already had hundreds of boats. They couldn't just put new boats out because that would increase their military size. So instead, they did the smart, quote unquote,
Oh, not to
smart
mention
thing.
how time consuming and expensive that is.
Oh yeah, no, because you have to understand that when you so just side note, when you in the Victorian era had to build boats, you couldn't just be like, I want one boat. You had to sign 10 to 20-year contracts with a boat manufacturer,
Mm-hmm.
and you had to give them the specifications of the. That's why they had like sister boats. It is. It was a huge, lengthy process. This was different in America, where you could just buy one boat because that mentality of industrialization was fairly new to them, and contracts were formed differently. Anyway, so when the British and the French had to put boats on, they had basically rolls of copper that would run along the side and they'd nail them in. And this was a poor substitute because if that metal got punctured, you couldn't really, and Aaron can probably agree with this, you couldn't really plug that up because first you had to get a hammer to bend the metal back because now you had this huge chunk of metal in your way, and then you had to put wood on it, but you couldn't do too long of nails because then you'd be hitting the metal plate on the outside. Not only that, but these ships now had sails and steam engines, but the steam engines were so bad that they often weren't used on long ocean travels because they couldn't keep up with the boat. And so, yeah, there's a reason why shortly after the Civil War, a lot of old boats got scrapped, and you get things like the dreadnought, the battleship, these huge
Mm-hmm.
metal monstrosities, because everyone realized very quickly from the American Civil War, this is how boats were going to be now.
Yep.
Oh,
Technology
Nick Flair, thanks
transforms.
for the raid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks
Hey,
again,
welcome.
Nix. That was awesome.
Nice to meet you, by the way. Tell us a little bit about your channel. You were streaming writers.
And
Cool.
we'll put a shout out for you.
I did, but we can do another one. Won't hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the advent of steel ship, and the reason that it was so big is because a lot of people had never considered the fact that because boats had always been like this. This is like the
Mm-hmm.
idea of a metal boat was preposterous. Like, why
Oh
would you
yeah.
do that? And
Exactly.
And then when the Americans did it and they saw the effectiveness of it, they're like, why haven't we always been doing this? We have the materials and the resources. Why haven't we been doing this? And it was
And
like
the arms race began and the age of sail, and that's how.
literally,
Yeah.
literally the world changed overnight.
Yeah. We're seeing the effects of a transformation in technology in the Ukrainian war right now, right?
Oh,
Science
Pomodoros.
fiction writers have been writing about the use of drones, small scale drones with operators forever. But we figured this was something that was probably going to happen, a couple from now, maybe. We're seeing it now. Nobody anticipated the effectiveness of strapping some kind of spy camera or a bomb, right? Of an explosive of some kind onto like a Walmart commercial fuck around and take pictures drone, right? Hats off to the Ukrainians for thinking of this. It's brilliant.
Hell, you want to know one of my favorite stories from Ukraine that I think is fucking hilarious?
What's that?
It was during a battle, and they had to try and figure out where the position of the Russian leadership was. And so
Yep.
what they did was they literally went on social media, found out they were posting shit. Not only were they posting shit, they were posting like lol missed, and they were going off of the social media posts, finding their position by reverse engineering the trajectory based on the coding in the social media post and nailing them. This is the future of warfare.
Yep. There you go. War, right? Also, the fact that we can hide very well now changes the way war works entirely. You can go, like Sparkles was saying, you can go on social media and find just about anybody.
Mhm. And
So we don't
this is
have to guess where you are.
this
Yeah.
is this is why cybersecurity in my mind is the future, and it's so important
Mhm.
because no joke, I can literally find everything out about Sable if they have a Facebook page just by clicking on their icon. Their phone number, where they live, where they're going, what their daily routine is, just by going to one or two social media sites. It's
Mhm.
crazy.
Yep. I guess so, Tempest. Nick's Flair says, I do Pomodoros on Tuesdays, Wednesdays. I play games on Thursdays and Fridays. Puns are encouraged. Sounds great. Yep, apparently someone flew a drone to the Kremlin with a small bomb and blew it up on the flag. That is a I fart in your general direction move, actually, which I have to say Ukraine has been very good at.
Hmm.
Things that are totally taunting. Yeah, they're very good at that, which defeats Russian morale, by the way, which is an incredibly good strategic move, right? Because um, strategic assets. What are the conditions of victory in the Ukraine and Russian war, right? The Ukrainians don't really know what the Russians want. You know, they want to take over the Ukraine.
Hmm.
Okay, but why? Right? The so what the Ukrainians are doing is defending their right. So for them, they've decided that the conditions of victory are they reclaim all their territory,
Hmm.
right? Does that necessarily mean that's the conditions of victory for Russia,
No.
right? Are they going to stop when the Ukrainians have taken back all their territory? Probably not, right? So what's going to make them stop? Not wanting to fight the war anymore, the populace getting exhausted, giving up, right?
In in a historical.
Propaganda becomes essential in that war.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's why everything out of Russia claims that the Russians are actively fighting NATO because Putin needs to have the Russians believe they have no choice but to fight, just as the Ukrainians know that they have no choice but to fight. In death ground fight, as Sun Tzu says, if you have to protect it, you fight till you can't, right? But it's why Ukraine is so much about taunting Russia, right? They want to make the Russians feel like they just don't have any hope. And that's why propaganda is important. It's part of the strategy.
And the
Who
thing
does just
is,
want to be Stalin?
and
Yeah.
another thing is, when thinking about war goals, you don't need to have this whole overarching, you know, like, an immediate picture of success. Um, because when you look at like things like the French Revolution, they fought for peace. They wanted to make sure that their new government was, able to grow, prosper. And they couldn't do that because all of Europe was like monarchy forever, and formed the first, and then the second, and then the third, and then the fourth coalition, and then the fifth coalition to try and take them out. So you could have just that we want peace, and the world is not allowing it. Goals
Yep.
do not need to be huge, huge things, but they can be something that is hugely important to your people. And this is where traditions come in.
Yes. This is where traditions come in, which is a good lead into that.
Hmm.
How did it get put? Societies fight the you cannot get a military to act in a different way from the society where it comes from. You can only build a military based on the society that it comes from.
Hmm.
Something that drives me absolutely batshit, right? In fantasy literature. Like I will start doing this and I will put down the okay? Yeah. Okay. Your peaceful farmer society has no ability to suddenly rise up and defend itself against some great empire of Roman style warrior culture unless they have a militia, guys, unless every farmer from the age of majority has a requirement to go and train and fight as militia, a certain number of days per month or a certain number of hours per week, right? If you do not have that, that farmer society has no idea how to, it has no equipment, it has no logistical support. It is going to get crushed. Okay. It's going to die. Right.
Oh,
And if with your militia, if you're a peaceful farmer society, right, you've got what you've got to fight. You don't have swords, you know, you don't own a sword. You're a farmer, right? You don't have any of that bullshit. You don't have, knights in shining armor. You have pitchforks, right? Maybe pikes that you can make, you have, right? That's what you've got. So that's what you're going to train to fight with, right?
mhm.
Sparkles, you were going to say.
I was going to say, I think a large part of this, and this is not saying anything against it, but I think a large part of this comes from Tolkien and The Hobbit. Bless you. Um, because people read The Hobbit and or read The Hobbit and they read Lord of the Rings and they think this little Hobbit man with no military training is doing all this successful shit. Well, if you actually read the book, he's not actually willingly going into combat. Combat is happening to him. Is the way that I like to put that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's only like with Bilbo. Bilbo doesn't really do a lot of combat in The Hobbit. It's only when the combat is forced upon him, the idea that great men are not born, greatness is thrust upon them. So when you have a culture that is largely farming, and you tell me that they're doing excellent in a battlefield, they better have served in the militia at some point. You better have like some kind of hidden military tradition or whatever. Because like in Warhorse, it was not uncommon for, soldiers after a war to want to lay down, put their roots in, get a farm. Because in Warhorse, when they go off to World War I, he hands them that banner. What is that banner, you ask? That's from the Franco-Prussian War, I believe. Or no, Boer War. It was Boer War. It was the English Boer War.
Right.
And yeah, and that is the epitome of, you have farmers, but there are farmers who are trained to fight. Never argue with an old man in
Hmm.
a profession where men die young.
Yep. I love people's comments about farmer type weapons. Yeah, axes, scythes, right?
No. Here's the thing:
Yeah.
you have the weapons. Do you have the mentality to use them? Aaron has made the point that you have to be a psychopath to want to kill your fellow man,
Yep.
and that's not just from someone coming to raid your village. That doesn't just come with that. That comes from a lifetime of being imposed through propaganda. This is the enemy. They are here to kill you. They will kill you the first chance you get. And if you do not fight back, they will kill you and your family in front of you.
Darth Torlin, where on earth did you get the idea that samurai are a noble feudal combat class
Yeah, they're
or
basically like
leadership
generals.
class?
They're the general class, basically.
They are not farmers.
Yeah, no. The farmers were a totally different class far beneath them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to talk about the myth of the ninja, right, which is not
Ninja could be.
entirely a myth. It's not
No.
entirely a myth. There's a lot of stuff that's mythological, but there is a grain of truth. Learning to fight with anything that basic farming implements, sure, that's valid. But those were not samurai.
Nope. The samurai were a noble class that passed down tradition. That's why you had the samurai code. That was something that was passed down from one samurai to their would essentially be their squire, um, or their child or whatever. But it was very much like the Indian caste system. You had to be born into a samurai. You could not just elevate yourself to samurai. You had to be part of a samurai family, which is why during the Warring States period, all the leaders were samurai because they were all the nobles, like Nobunaga Oda, I think his name was. They were all from the noble upper class. It's why they had castles. I don't think farmers have castles unless you're in Ireland and the castle's been blown up.
I'm gonna remember that quote. Yeah, it's accurate. By the way, for those who don't know, Dazzlecat is an airman. She was in the Air Force, so she has a lot of good things to say about war too, from a fighting perspective, right?
And for all the new people, my name is Barbarossa Sparklebeard, or Mr. Teacher Writes, depending on what platform you're on. I am a college student who is currently studying military and just average history for the last 4 years. So I don't consider myself a professional. But I do
Right,
consider myself an amateur historian who really likes swords and guns
and things like that. Yes.
and things of that nature. Yes,
Okay, so
I am in no way a professional. Do not quote me. Do not use me in your
uh
papers.
uh sorry. Okay, yeah. Okay, so no need. I'm sorry. Darth Torlin misspoke and meant ninjas, and we are doing a pile on. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make you feel like it's a pile on. I hear a lot of myths
Yeah,
about how Asian societies and combat works, and in general, like different, and it doesn't even matter. Like all Asian cultures, there's so many myths, right? And I just feel kind of soapboxy about countering them, right? It's not a judgment on you. Awesome.
I largely blame it on movies like 27 Ronin and things that emphasize quote unquote Asian culture, but without actually studying it.
Yeah. So I apologize, and I'm sorry.
Budget, 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 budget,
Yeah, this is not meant to be a pile on.
mushroom,
You're awesome,
You know,
Darth.
yeah, you really are. It's cool. You're absolutely right. Um, okay. So is this going to be my new format? Focus on cool topics per stream. I probably won't do it every day, but I probably do it every days or at least once a week. Yeah, I'm getting back into more of the, let's have a topic. Let's, get into stuff that'll help writers. It's something I was meaning to do. And yeah, so you'll see more of this. I'll let you know. I'll let you know what's up and when it's just a working stream for sure. Um, all right. So, all right, where was I?
We're talking about
Terrain,
traditions.
technology, tradition. Yes. Um, if a culture is focused on war, they will spend a lot of money preparing for it. They will spend a lot of effort in training people for it. what is the current population ratio of soldier, sailor, military personnel in the United States there, Barbarossa? Do you know?
I don't honestly know, but I do. So I used to play a game called Nation States, and it's a role playing kind of server where you basically create a nation, you pretend to be this country, and we had a rule where it was like you had to decide your population, and it couldn't be like anything massive. Um, and if you were in peacetime, you could have as high as like 1% of your population be in the military. Anything in between 1 and 0%. And if you were in war, you could have up to 5%. And Moonflower
Yes,
points a good point. It's 0.43. It's when you are not at war, the military is a very small.
it has to be, or your society will not continue to function.
Yep. I mean,
Thank you, Moon.
mhm.
Excellent.
I mean,
Data provided.
here's an honest to god fact. After World War I, during World War I, there were this practice called PAL battalions, which was a military recruiter would come to your village and be like, "Hey, you want to join the army, but you don't want to be alone. So I'm going to recruit every young boy in this village, and you're all going to go into this battle together." Well, you know what happens in World War I? Everyone gets fucking killed, and you lose that entire battalion. You know what happens to that village? You just lost an entire generation of young men. So
Mhm.
you don't have any farm workers, and this is actually what happened to a lot of villages and hamlets in World War I. If you actually look at the population centers of Britain pre World War I and pre World War II, you will notice a lot of villages died out because they just did not have the population afterwards to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, guys. Right? So, okay, this is important, right? You cannot have a whole society fighting,
Nope.
right? And if, because somebody still has to like feed people, right?
Yep.
So the the United States is probably one of the militant cultures in the modern world.
Yep.
And as you can see, 0.43% of United States population is ready for combat. And yet the military of the United States seems huge and overwhelming. And it really is, right? The United States has an army that is not, they talk about securing the nation, but it's really an imperial, it's designed to control territory in vast areas. And it's not like if you look at the next top 10 largest militaries and put them together, they would not make up a tenth of the United States military, right? Like in terms of like combat strength and whatnot. Now, granted, I'm sure China has more, but if you're going to make a big army, right, you need a big population, or you need a very war focused population, or you need life to be so shitty if you're not in the army that people join the army just because it's better for them, right?
Now, just to give you an idea of that 0.43%. Now, you think that's tiny, and I thought that was tiny,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted to make sure. That is 1,427,000 people. That is how big the U.S. is.
Mm-hmm.
That is 1 million people that are like in our active military that are ready to go. And I told you that the maximum on that game was 5%. The U.S. in World War II was at 5%. Now
So
imagine that.
let's let this by comparison, okay? Canada, NATO is constantly giving us shit. Our NATO commitment, which is, I forget, what is it? What's the percentage? 2% of GDP or something,
It's something. Bless you.
right? I should know this, but I've forgotten this morning. Bless you, babe. Right?
Thank you.
Um, we're constantly not meeting that target. But what you have to understand is that Canada punches above its weight, right?
Hmm.
we're actually a very small nation by population and comparison. I think that our entire country makes up the population of the state of California,
Yep.
right? So we just don't have the society that can spend that much money, right? We could get close if we wanted to do things like stuff that I think we should do as Canadians anyway, which is put a few military bases up in the Arctic and declare the entire northern waters around us as our waters, kind of thing, right? And protect our sovereignty there, right? But why don't we do that? Because the Americans get pissed off, right?
Not only that, but we would probably see that as friggin' because that's up by Alaska. We don't want that.
Exactly, right? You know, right? So what do we do, right? Instead, are we ever going to be able to fight the American military? No. Like, you're like so big and so got so much more stuff than we do.
We're
There's no way
scary. I get it.
in hell it's not going to happen, right? So instead, we back the Americans, right?
Mhm.
And we work on specialist professions, right? The best snipers in the world are Canadians,
Yep.
right? We do stuff like there's a bunch of Canadians in training troops right now, right?
Mhm.
We do that kind of shit because that's the society that we have that we can use to support our efforts as a NATO ally. We still have one of the biggest military. That's the
Yeah, we
comparison.
rank in the top 10.
Yep.
Yeah. Right? Societies fight with what the army depends on society that it's.
I will say this, just to kind of go on with Moonflower's point. Yeah, 16% is a really high number, and that seems like bigger is better. And we were just discussing, after a certain while, you start running out of people to throw at it. You have to remember that France during World War One had a number of mutinies by 1918 because they were not getting food, they were not getting supplies, and their military generals was just keep piling the bodies onto the mountain.
Mhm.
Eventually, they're going to run out of bullets.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
and
there's a cer-
like
there's,
Moon pointed out, the highest number on that set. This is the point that she's trying to make, right? When the war was literally in their backyards and
mhm.
they had no choice but to fight or die, 16% of the population.
It should also be noted because this is very important. We know France of World War II, which was they surrendered in 6 weeks. We often forget that France has more victories than losses in its entire history.
Mm-hmm.
Its history is a military nation.
Yep.
So 16% may not be that big of a number to them. And we have to remember again with tradition, numbers have meaning to people.
Mm-hmm.
To the US, we don't need more than 8, maybe 10% because we have 331 million people. Even want to say 1,000.
Not to
France,
mention that the technology makes it easy to fight bigger
oh yeah,
wars with smaller numbers of people now. That's
oh yeah,
something else to take into
and and
consideration.
and the
Technology
other
dictates war, right?
yeah, and the other thing is France had that massive military number because they are a river valley, and I'm going to combine everything we just talked about. France is a river valley. They have lots of food. Lots of food needs lots of technology to farm, to grain, to build up, and to can produce and make food. The more food you have, the more people you have. The more people you have, the more soldiers you have. The more soldiers you have, the more easy it is to defend your country. Which is why France, even though it doesn't like nowadays is known as the surrender white flag country, lol. Um, it was a huge threat. It was one of the first countries in European history to reach at 1 million soldiers. The first one to do it was Russia.
Yeah, don't forget Napoleon was a French guy. And he just about took over the planet,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that's what I'm saying. Like when you discuss your country, it's important to know the idea that food terrain makes food. Food makes people. People make soldiers. Soldier makes power.
The reason why the Mongol invasions happened because the surplus of grain, of just grasses and whatnot available
Mhm.
the steppes, because they had some really good rain years, which led to a surplus population of horses, which led to a bunch of cavalry that the Mongols could take out to get more shit, which they did. What happened to the Mongols? Why did they cease to be a threat? They stopped being a nomadic people and settled down. And thus, the shift to their culture, their method of military did not survive it. Yeah, it's a very good example, right? Mongols are amazing.
We need more Mongols in fantasy.
History of
Is
the
all I'm
Mongol
saying.
Queens. I recommend this to people for a good example of interplay of politics and military there.
We need
We are
more
starting to,
historically. We need more historically accurate Mongols in history.
we do
They're not the dumb horsey people that everyone plays them out to be.
definitively not. Yes.
There's a
We are
reason
running
why
out of
game.
time, and there's a few more things that I really cover.
Okay.
I think that both Stretch and Daz have very good points about Canadian snipers.
Mhm.
Stretch isn't wrong. He's
What was
joking,
that?
but he's not wrong, right?
What's that?
Why does Canada have the best snipers? Because due to the vast open spaces, the Canadian can fire a gun and chances don't hit anyone. Purely because there's nobody in the way, so easier to practice. Maybe in the prairie, but the rest of the country is rocks and trees and trees and rocks and trees and trees and trees.
I make the
And
joke that
snow.
North Dakota and Canada are so flat. I've been watching my dog run away for 2 weeks now.
Yeah, the middle part of Canada is flat.
Hmm.
It's very bumpy on either end.
Our mountains are very pointy.
Okay, bringing it back because I said I was running out of time. Not
Yep.
okay. Daz points out being a sniper is a bigger tradition for Canadian troops. Yes, bringing back to tradition, right? Yeah, being a sniper is a tradition for Canadian troops because generally we've been in a support for bigger allies since the formation of our nation. So we tend to specialize, right? And contribute as part of a group rather than build our own separate military force. We're designed to puzzle with them. Okay.
So just going on a tradition, my country that I'm working on is called Adros, and it has dire wolves. Dire wolves are a huge traditional thing because their neighbors is dragons. And I put that the dire wolves, when work together, take down dragons. So that is a huge tradition for them. So when you're creating your country and your wars, figure out why your units are specifically cavalry. Is it because they have a lot of horses? Why are they snipers? Is it because it's a traditional thing? Maybe they were the first nation to have guns. So you have to think that tradition will shape not only your military, but how your government looks at your military. What is key and important?
Okay. So I am now getting to a point where we have half an hour left.
Mhm.
Right? So I have to make a choice. I can either take it slow and do another stream based on it, which I will not do tomorrow. I need to get my voice, but I will do Thursday,
Mhm.
right? Or where I continue, right? Or I can try to summarize some of my points rather briefly. Which would you guys prefer? We have a fairly big audience at
Personally, I say summarize because I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here, and I don't know what else we could really expand on.
Okay, so I have two things I need to cover to keep this in mind in interruptions.
Mhm.
Okay, one is
Rabbit,
okay,
rabbit,
well, three
rabbit,
things.
rabbit, 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 rabbit,
This might take a while.
rabbit,
Okay, I got a bunch of things I have to cover. Limit interruptions to no more than 30 seconds to a minute.
Zip.
All right, here we go. Okay, first thing is okay, yes. Types of units in war. Just about everything can be boiled down to the functions. Okay, like this is a real oversimplification.
Mhm.
Do not shoot me. This is not really how war works, but for the purposes of I need to come up with a basic strategy for a plot line that's going to seem realistic to my players or readers, there are 4 major types of units, and everything else works as one of these things in any given battlefield. Heavy infantry, light infantry, heavy cavalry, light cavalry.
Hmm.
You know how you play rock, paper, scissors, right?
Yep.
Rock beats scissors, scissors beats paper, paper beats rock. These four units, types of units work like that. Okay? No, dragons are light cavalry.
Yep.
If they're heavily armored, they're heavy cavalry. Here we go. Here we go. Okay? Heavy infantry will generally beat light infantry.
Yep.
All things given created equal, right? Your heavy infantry is better armored. They are better for defense, right? They have, so it's going to, like, a light infantry person is not going to be able to do damage to them in a short term unless they significantly outnumber, right? Defensive capabilities usually defeat all but overwhelming offensive capabilities. That's why castles are good technology. Sieges work. You want to, defending yourself from a siege works. You want to take somebody in a siege, you need at least 3 to every 1 person. And I've heard a story of 1 woman and 6 servants defended a castle in the English Civil War against, I think it was something like 300 knights. Yeah, there is a reason a tank is only truly effective. Light infantry, troopers, boots on the ground with it. Yes, because it has shit mobility.
Yep. Light infantry is going to be mainly scouts. Heavy infantry is going to be like your machine gunners, your riflemen, your machine riflemen.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You need light infantry to protect the heavy infantry, right? Kind of
Hmm.
thing,
Heavy
right?
cavalry.
Heavy cavalry,
Light
yes.
infantry to protect the
Right.
heavy cavalry.
Yep.
Heavy cavalry will
Does
defeat,
best against light infantry.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
but it'll also, yeah, okay. Yeah, exactly. Heavy cavalry is best against light infantry. Heavy infantry is best against heavy cavalry. Light cavalry is best against heavy infantry. And whether or not light infantry or light cavalry depends on superior range.
Hmm. I can agree with
So
that.
there's your rock, paper, scissors, guys.
Yep.
Now all you have to do is figure out what does everything count as. The thing about cavalry is that they generally have the advantage of mobility, right? Heavy has better defensive capabilities, and light is more mobile, right? So
Yep.
this is all about, if you have to defend a territory, you want heavy stuff, right? If you want to take a territory, you generally light stuff if you have to make a choice, but light and heavy, right? The more
When
range you have, the better.
when deciding these things, you basically have to make a choice. So you want them fast, you want them to hit hard.
Daz has a point there. This is also why a U.S. naval, like it. Yes,
Yep. This is why you have escorts. This is why you have a battleship surrounded by destroyers and escort destroyers. There is hierarchy.
the bigger
It's
and
very important.
more defensively capable something is, the less maneuverable it is.
Yep. Like I said, you either need it to be fast, or you need it to hit hard. You cannot have something that is fast that hits hard. Not
Yes.
until modern warfare when you get into artillery, but that's beyond the point.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. So you can if I had more time, I would break this down in more detail, but generally consider your types of units and how they apply in the given situation, right? And think of them like that. Who's the quote heavy cavalry, right?
Hmm.
Who's the quote heavy infantry? You can think of this in terms of spaceship fleets, which also would probably be designed in a space navy, space opera scenario, very much like a U.S. naval fleet if the nation has the money to do that. Yeah, even a small PT boat can sink a much larger ship. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. You want your this is they would be like cavalry in that situation, right?
Yeah.
You send a small attack force in, they go in, they pepper bomb, right? They, shoot a couple things in place, and it's the farthest distance away that they can, and then they circle back out so that they get out of the line of fire. right?
Yep.
We saw this in terms of like dog fighting in World Wars, right? All kinds of examples of this. The Crusades, right? We had heavily armored knights, heavy cavalry, and heavy infantry
Fighting in a desert.
fighting in a desert, trying to make their way to a place they could defend, but they don't have a position they can defend at the time. They're moving to a position they want to attack and defend, right? And in the meantime, the light cavalry of the Muslim troops are swooping in, peppering them with arrows, and screwing off before they can do anything about it. They got creamed.
And
Right?
and to the exact opposite of that, charge the light brigade.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Tell us more. Yeah. Like
Charge the
people
light
may not be
brigade.
familiar.
Charge
But
of the Light
yes.
Brigade happened in the Crimean War, just to simplify it. Basically, the commander said, I want you to take all these Russian guns, and they sent in a whole bunch of basically scouts to try and take these guns. Unfortunately, the guns happened to be big old cannons, and they got fucking creamed
Mhm.
because that's what we were discussing before. Heavy infantry takes out light cavalry
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have armor. They went in with swords, and they were charging on fast horses with zero defenses. So, so when you're dictating like how strategy works, always remember if it's something is light, it is going to be fast. It's good for scouting. It's good for getting to the place and back in the least amount of time. But if they run into enemies, they are also going to be the first to die.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's all the time I can spend on it at the moment. If you
Yep.
guys have more questions about it later, feel free to ask me because this can be expanded on with lots of different examples of history.
I can see a whole stream on this.
Yeah, I could too. So we can do that.
Yep.
All right. What else did I want to cover here? Politics and war are intrinsically linked, especially if you are talking about, well, and it doesn't really matter actually,
Yeah.
right? Politics and war are intrinsically linked. Politics often dictate your strategy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And determine the conditions of victory. Remember what we said about strategic assets. What do you need to accomplish in order to quote unquote win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Lincoln
right.
Lincoln himself said the best. A house divided cannot stand.
Okay,
Yep.
well, I'm going to take off here for a few.
Okay, Aaron.
Where are you?
I-
What? With
I need
like
to get
20
some
minutes to
food.
go?
Yeah,
Food.
I'm leaving the stream running. I gotta go get some food.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah, a house divided cannot stand. If your politics are fucked up and you're basically having a civil war, how do you expect to defend your country?
Right. Exactly. Okay. Yeah, that's the other thing I really want in detail before I started addressing the myths. Oh yeah.
Myths.
Wait. What? Okay. One more thing about. Sorry, I want to talk about heavy infantry, light infantry, heavy cavalry, light cavalry being your
Mm-hmm.
basic units of war. Right. In a flat environment like plains,
Mm-hmm.
heavy cavalry will lose against light cavalry.
Oh yeah.
When you
Every
have to
time.
maneuver, light cavalry is going to kick your ass there. In
Yep.
mountains or other rocky things with changes in
Cavalry loses all the time.
yes, and light cavalry will use to heavy cavalry in that environment because the heavy cavalry, right? But yes, cavalry will lose in that environment period because even the heavy cavalry has to be somewhat more lightly armored than the heavy infantry because to get any advantage of maneuverability you have to horses, you got to move supplies or vehicles or whatever, right? And the infantry is just better equipped to deal with that.
That
right?
horse hits a ledge wrong, it's gonna do one or two things. It's gonna break its leg or it's gonna break the ledge, and you lost. Either way, you've lost the horse.
Yes. Right. So yeah. Okay. So that was just the last thing I wanted to say about that. This is why chess is a good example or sports competitions, any of the rugby derivatives guys, with
Hmm.
rugby, football, hockey, right? Soccer, right? Both kinds of football in whatever country, right? All of these, right, are good examples of how war works, because you have units which are basically heavy cavalry, light cavalry, heavy infantry, and light infantry, right? And you move against to simulate the war. Yeah, and war playing card game. Actually, very good example, Torlin. Yeah, you're totally right. Totally. Okay,
Yep.
NCOs,
Uh,
non-commissioned officers.
my favorite.
Tell me why NCOs are Sparkle.
So NCOs are great because basically they are the free thinkers, but they also make sure shit gets done. When your officer gives an order, it's not going to be a bunch of buck wild privates doing whatever they want. You're going to have a non-commissioned officer like a sergeant giving the orders. You're going to have someone who is going to basically this is the best way I can put it. Your officer gives them a goal, the non-commissioned officer figures out how to make that goal plausible.
Exactly.
The hard to do is done on demand. The impossible takes time.
Yep. That's love it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um. Okay. It is the job of the officer to send people to die.
Yep.
That's the job.
The NCO just decides how they die.
The NCO's job is to maintain resources,
Yep.
right? That includes the Army or the
Hmm.
Navy, whatever it is. Yep. So that is why having an NCO is a competent NCOs. But here's the thing: there's not a lot of NCOs. Bringing it back. Remember, I said this discussion would come back. The Russian military is a good example. What happens? No or shitful NCOs. Okay, if you've seen any of the footage, right, of Russian camps that have been taken over, you cannot believe the filth, right?
Hmm.
Everything is a mess. It's a squalor. It's gross, right? Why is it like that? Because they have no real NCOs that are like they have like the conscripts, the army, and they have, right. There's nobody in between, just looking after well-being. Oh, thank you. There's ads. I need to wait. Yeah,
Friggin' ads.
ads. Shake fist.
I can't wait till the myths. That'll be a good last 15 minutes.
Yes,
Last 10 minutes.
it'll. Yeah, last 10 minutes. Good. Yes,
Hmm.
you can pound your soapboxes. I'll pound mine.
Yeah. I think we covered everything pretty well. I mean, I know that we didn't cover it all, but I don't think there was any way we're gonna have a good time covering all the units. That's a whole rigmarole in itself.
It totally is. You're not. Yeah. And besides, we're trying to create, we're trying to tell people really, war may not be their focus, but we're trying to give them what they need to write about.
Yeah.
It's a good basic,
Yep.
right?
Budget, 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 budget,
We're back.
mushroom.
With 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now we're back. Where were we? Yes, NCOs and their importance. And okay, dysentery has killed more than in the course of history.
1/3 of deaths in World War One were killed by disease. Actually, no. World War One was the first time where disease was not the primary killer, but that's only because mechanization was such a big deal. It came
Yes.
back in World War Two. I mean, just look at Stalingrad. Stalingrad was a mixture of military mechanization, disease because they'd blown up the sewer system and the rail tracks.
This is one of the reasons why you need NC. Well, why I think it's a good idea to have NC, Okay. Because, I mean, some cultures just don't. But I think it's a superior way to do work because it's their job to maintain the resources, the people who are fighting the war. So they see to things like cleanliness, knowing that dysentery has killed more soldiers than bullets.
Oh yeah.
Right? So they make you clean the shit up. Now, honestly, some guy, you know, come in from whatever village or whatever it is, right? You know, is not going to give two shits about some random officer coming in and saying, clean up this mess. These guys are going to clean up the mess until officers left, and then they're just going to. But the NCO is like a rental figure. If at least the good ones are, because they're taking care of the people, right? They're taking care of the troops. So this is like pissing off mom, right? And your mom comes in there and says, clean up this goddamn mess. What the hell's the matter with you? Immediately, asshole. And you clean it, right? Very important to have a good NCO. You're in any military structure where you have NCO. They had NCOs in Rome, by the way. Just a second. They had a name for them. They were, I wrote it down.
They were legates, weren't they?
Maybe. Write it down. Notes. Like, I'm looking for Roman names, but
Principales.
that's it. That's it.
Principales. That's
Right?
it. Just came to me.
It was one of the ways in which the Roman army was very effective, right? So, yeah. Important role of NCOs: keep your army organized and cares. Officers. No, okay, I covered that. Yeah, the primus pilum, I guess, is the name I was given. Had right. In a force that has, if you're writing a novel, you know, creating an adventure, a military force that has your good officers will listen to them, and your shitty officers think they know better, and people will die. It's a trope, but it's there for a reason.
Yep. The officer who doesn't learn from his mistakes is not an officer for very long.
Right.
For multiple reasons.
So let's just before we get into the myths of that we're going to blow up. Case study based on the things, or many of the things we've covered today. Why is Ukraine doing so well against Russia, which so clearly outnumbers them, has so much more money, and has had a much longer time machine?
So,
right?
In my personal opinion,
Hmm?
they are losing on the terrain because they are a very flat country. However, terrain is not just the terrain, it is knowledge of it. And they know their backyard better than I know your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Technology wise, they're being supported by some of the most advanced nations in the world right now. And we're quickly learning that Russia has been lying a lot about their technological capabilities compared to what the world has been preparing for. See, that's the problem when you lie to people. When you tell them that I have a bunch of knuckle dusters under my glove, I'm going to be putting up like a full on metal mask. And when you hit me, you're breaking your hand because you didn't actually have knuckle dusters. You had just a bare fist. And now who's laughing? And that's what's happening in Ukraine. Ukraine has the best American air defense. It's having German tanks. It has American F-32, F-16s, F-18s, etc., going against 40-year-old equipment. As for tradition,
if I can address Daz's point, because it's a good one, it is soft terrain, and that is a huge factor. Yes, bringing it back to terrain dictates. It's soft terrain, it's flat, it's difficult to fight in and protect, it's difficult to move equipment through it. This is why rail becomes so important, and control of railways became an important tactical asset that both sides had to compete for, because this is the only really effective and efficient way to move shit through the country. You can't move it through the air because you're just going to blow each other's planes out of the air, right? So rail became very important. Terrain dictates, technology dictates. And you were about to say tradition. How does tradition dictate this war? Why is it happening this?
Well, we can look all the way back to the 1600s with the Cossacks. The Ukrainians have had a long tradition of fighting and freedom, and even into the modern age, where we can look at the knights who went to the Russian Empire wearing, no joke, chainmail and swords, wanting to go into war because that's how they thought war fought. These are men who are willing, men and women, boys and girls, and people who have been fighting to defend their borderland. And I call it a borderland because that's literally what Ukraine means.
Hmm. A
They have been
valid
fighting.
point.
They've been fighting this for their independence, for their land, since Kievan Rus. They have been fighting this for over the last 1,000 years, and it should not come to a surprise to this many people that they're gonna be good at fighting.
Uh-huh. Daz has another good point there, which goes to culture. Ukraine was brilliant in destroying bridges and rails and
Oh yeah,
ways, which they did even before fighting the invaders. That
oh
was the
yeah,
most critical saved Ukraine. Good planning,
yeah.
good logistical planning, good
When you
engineering. Yeah.
when you look at how Ukraine prepared for the war, you'll notice that they did similarly to what they did with France. They destroyed any access to Kiev. Russians had to take the long way round,
Mhm.
and
And the
it's
last
because
thing, though, because you're right,
yeah,
okay, the last thing that I can think of culturally, right, is remember what I said about bad morale, right? The Ukraine has, it's better for your morale to lift your wounded off the field,
hmm
right, and defend them, right? The the Russians don't give a shit. The Russians who are actually there fighting, they don't really care, right? There's all kinds of to Ukraine when they're confronted in some cases because they're a bunch of conscripts. They're forced into this battle. They're not invested. They don't really understand why the hell they don't give a fuck, right? The Ukrainians are fighting for their homes,
hmm
bigger motivation, right? So and better mutual, which is absolutely essential, by the way, if Ukrainian morale is.
I was just about to say that the biggest problem with the war in Ukraine right now is honestly the Russian war goals, because as we're quickly finding out, a lot of Russian soldiers going over there don't even know why they're there.
Mhm.
So if you go into a war without reason, and to go to a different war, the United States, when it had its civil war, one of the biggest problems that it had at the start of the war was trying to figure out, why are we going into the South and why are we fighting them? And a lot of people would say, "Oh, well, they knew about slavery." No, it did not become about slavery until Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and made
Mhm.
the war have an actual goal. Only then did the United States actually have a goal. Before that, the United States was going in there because, well, they attacked Fort Sumter. And everyone's like, well, Fort Sumter is in South Carolina. Why were you there? It's already been freed. So, like, they didn't
Yeah.
have a reason. If you don't have a reason for fighting your war, why are you fighting the war? Your soldiers are going to question you every step of the way.
Yep. All right. So I might be willing to go as much as 5 to time to discuss myths of war that need to be broken.
Okay.
We're going to go back and forth. Each one of us gets one, and then the other one gets one. And if
Okay.
anybody else wants to throw something in, feel free if you can back your statement with research,
Mhm.
right? So, what's your favorite pet peeve? Myths of war broken.
Oh, oh. This is going to be kind of a controversial one. I absolutely hate it when you have like a group of 5 dudes and they are able to completely just decimate an army, but there's no reason why that army should have been decimated. Like, it's perfectly flat ground. They haven't prepared anything, but you have that hero moment of just like 5 dudes just completely surrounded, and then they come out walking like, yeah, that was easy. Like, no, no, it wasn't. How did you even survive that?
Numbers are a thing, guys. Yeah, the Rambo moment.
Yeah. So the reason I hate it so much is because, well, there is examples of that. You have not set that up. My example was they blew up a bridge. They had the high ground, so you had to cross over a moat, go up a hill, get to their fortified machine gun nest, and only then were you there face to face with a fully loaded Browning machine gun. Like, that took time and effort. You standing in an open field as like the zombies completely surround you, that's not effort. I don't know how you did that.
Yeah. Yeah, makes no sense.
Yeah.
Okay, my favorite, of course, we've already discussed. Women have always been knucklehead. All right, but my second is wear a fucking helmet. Why does nobody on the fantasy have a goddamn helmet on?
So I personally blame Hollywood for that because they have to see the actor's face, and they're like, if you don't see their face, then you're not going to see it, motherfucker.
Okay, I got two things to bust that. A, the series The Mandalorian, which communicates emotion very well, just fine without seeing the face. And B, you want to know who somebody is? That's what Harold for, guys.
Well, no,
Also,
I was gonna say,
yeah.
I was gonna say, just to counteract that, when people are like, "Well, you can't see their face, you're not gonna who it is." Motherfucker, these people are noblemen. They have customized their armor because they have the money and the prestige to do that. Make their armor look cool because it's going to look cool. If they have the money and the prestige to do that, they are going to look cool on the battlefield because that's what they want to do.
Daz has a very good point there. The fallacy in movies of shooting people dropping like flies. 90% of combat shooting are misses, not hits. Remember me mentioning this book? Usually that's by design. Actually, want to kill each other. It's very difficult to make them actually kill each other. Ammo gets wasted in a battle, 100%. Ammo gets spewed everywhere in a mad mist. It's almost accidental for people to get killed. Yep,
Okay.
very good point. Your turn.
Another one of my fallacies is that if you're on a stealth mission, you must have a silencer. Like, the silencer is always just like perfectly quiet. No one can hear it. It's the pew, pew, pew. And my brain is like, it's not actually that quiet. A gunshot is loud. A silencer doesn't make it silent as much as the name says. Yes, Moonflower say that, and that's gonna be my next one. But it's when you see a movie with a silencer, and it's just like they're managing to go like kill someone right next to the person with a silencer. Like, it still makes a sound. Silencers are not the end all thing that you think they are.
And it only has so many uses, as Daz.
Yeah.
If you would really like to do yourself a favor, to give your some ability, go somewhere where you can put on the armor of whatever period is you're fighting, pick up the weapons that they're supposed to be using, and give them a try.
Oh yeah, no, it's great.
Guns are fucking loud. If you don't know that, go to the range, get a friend to take you. If you've never picked up a gun, I did. It was useful.
Oftentimes, gun ranges will have period weapons too. I know that there's one here I was looking up recently. They have M1 Garens from like World War One. So like, yeah, like, don't be afraid to ask. I'm pretty sure there's some that even in your local area, if you have enough historical significance, you probably can find muskets or at least muzzle loaders. They have modern muzzle loaders.
Yes, at the very least, wear the headgear and see how it affects vision when aiming. Yeah, which is it's pointed, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, DM Stretch, same. I've fired both a shotgun and a Magnum pistol, and let's just say after the first shot, a person said, and I yelled, "What?"
Yeah. See, do not do that to your ears, guys. Okay. The first time I fired a shotgun was my Graham soldier took me to the range with his gun collection, which is extensive. different types, different pistols, shotgun, several rifles, some which are vintage, right? Some submachine guns, right? He probably had to get rid of a bunch of it with a change in Canadian. But okay, so he took me there. First time I fired a shotgun, right? I had ear protection, right? Leveled it, fired it, freaked out because it was so loud. Even with protection, I thought it had blown up.
Hmm.
Like, it's loud, guys. It's terrible. Quietest are 22s and they're still noisy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. My dad has 22s here, and we had them out at our old house when we had mice because it's easier to hit it because they get into real tight spots,
Mm-hmm.
and even then, like you fire it underneath a stove, it rattles, it bang.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another
Let's.
thing. That's another thing. Going into like small detail, but like when you were describing where they're going into, like a house, echoes. Echoes are really loud,
They
especially
are really loud.
older houses. And also, just final note. When you're in urban combat, there's an actual book from World War II where when they were throwing in grenades and shooting into old houses, they had to dive down after shooting because of the dust from like wattle and daub would kick up so badly. It was like being on a house on fire. They could not stand up straight and see clearly in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Sable, your point?
Yeah. I actually want to cover some said in chat lost, which being we've covered it already, but her biggest pet peeve is everyone is well fed and not foraging water
Yes.
related travel or is hungry. You know,
Hmm.
how the you remember the scene when the fellowship was moving the mountain.
Yep.
That's more like what it's getting thinner and dirtier and more ragged. That's really it's
Hmm.
like yeah.
Kind of to go up on that point is when
Mhm.
you see in certain military movies where they have like a whole plate of like food piled on, and my brain goes, "That is more than your daily rations. That's more than your weekly rations. Where the fuck you get
You'll have
that?"
to wait a minute, baby. I'm sorry. Just a sec, okay?
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah. Ragged breathing affects your aim.
Hmm.
Yes. Right. So think about this, right? Everybody's like jacked up adrenaline because they have to be under fire and they're trying to aim straight. But even psychopaths end up wasting a whole bunch of ammo because it's hard to shoot things. Das makes a point also in battle, clouds of gun smoke make seeing the enemy in order to hit
Hmm.
them difficult. Everyone forgets the smoke. You want to do yourselves a favor? Go watch a movie. I think it's from the 70s called Waterloo.
Yes. Yes. That
Okay.
and Gettysburg. Gettysburg is around the same time. It's excellent movie.
Yes, because this shows you things like what a lot actually like and the amount of smoke.
This is what
Holy shit.
this is why I have to keep telling people, like
I'll
when
be
you look at
I
European
gotta I
warfare.
gotta help Aaron keep talking.
Okay.
Okay.
This is why I absolutely hate when people are like, oh, those colorful uniforms are terrible. There's a reason why they were so gosh darn colorful, because then you could tell them apart when you couldn't see anything, so you weren't stabbing your good friend Frederick over here when you're trying to attack Pierre. It's crazy, but yeah, that's the reason why the colorful uniforms existed, because that was the only way to see when before gunpowder, because you had black powder, which was so much bigger, had a much bigger explosion. Um, and then speaking of Moon with the ragged breathing, a great movie, a great movie that I recommend everyone watch if you want to do like snipers and stuff. Enemies at the Gate. You will watch how they move. They are ducked down. They are moving very slowly, and they are moving in a very particular way as not to burn a lot of energy. The reason they're doing that is because they have to keep moving as snipers, because if they
Mm-hmm.
don't, if they fire and try to fire again, this is the problem with that,
Mm-hmm.
because when you fire as a sniper, you have just given yourself away. Even if no one knows where you fire from, you have just given yourself away. And now you have to move. But you can't move too far away, or else, as we mentioned before, ragged breathing will affect your aim, which is why they're
Mm-hmm.
ducked down or crawling. They're trying to waste as little energy as possible.
Okay, ancient battles. Most of the death took place after the battle, not during.
Of infection or disease or blank. Insert here.
Well, yep, but also the job of cavalry. You know how this idea of cavalry and the code of chivalry and all that nonsense. Okay, the job of cavalry is to ride down the other guys when they break from being an actual army and turn into a bunch of running individuals and kill them.
Yep.
That's the job of cavalry. That's what they're for. That's what they've always, right? That's why cavalry sabers are designed the way they are, because then you could go swoop and your sword actually comes out of the guy you just slaughtered before you bring it down to slaughter the next guy. Like
And
that's what it's for.
and even beyond that, the idea of scavengers who come to a battlefield afterwards, they are not going to protect the wounded. There's this idea of the noble scavenger who's like, "Oh, there's a survivor, I must save him." No, they see you as like, "Oh, you're kind of messed up. I'm not a doctor. Sorry, I'm taking your shit though."
Yep. Moon, you had something to say about that?
It's important to note, though, that it's very rare that you die instantly because you're supposed to survive things as a human being, living creature thing. Your body doesn't want to die. It's going to try and hang on. It's going to be painful. It's going to be horrible. You're going to die anyway. Yeah.
Yep.
That's why I'm saying infection, disease, whatever. What have
Yep.
you.
If you
Even
have
if your arm's chopped off.
Yeah, here's another thing that drives me absolutely insane, okay? You don't have to kill everybody in the army to make it completely unavailable to fight. Your percentages, guys, are usually way off. If you've lost more than 30% of whatever military force you're using, you can't fight. It's done, right? That's considered the standard number, right? You might be lucky, you might have lost 30% and they all happen to be like, everybody except the, like in a particular unit that you don't really need, but you can form. But odds are that's not what happened, right? So really, you don't, if 30% of military is killed or wounded, battle's over. You don't have to have it be a slaughter to a man, right? It doesn't have to be. Most aren't, because most people won't fight that long, right? They'll go, you know what? I surrender. Maybe I'll have mercy because this is pointless. People don't want to die, you know?
There is a thing called survival instincts.
Even goblins actually don't want to die, right? And if they think you'll be nicer to them than the slave driver at their back, they will throw themselves on your mercy. This is why that's rewarded in our campaigns, as people watched our toy soldier campaigns will, right? Yeah, if you make a battle to the last man, there has to be if the reason is the goblins know well, or they believe, okay, if the goblins believe that the Dark Lord is all powerful, know exactly what happened to them, and they're more scared of him than they are, they'll fight you to the last man, right? This is why politics in North Korea work the way they do, right? Like there's all kinds of beliefs about the dear leader, right? People think he's telepathic. This myth is perpetuated because he wants his army more scared of him than they are of you, right?
Remember, 10% decimates a society.
With 10% of the general population, your society and its technology level collapse because you have lost so many people in vital positions on average by that point that no idea how to, you got to build again for much all. Yep. Yes, that's why the Americans hated fighting to the death. Yep. 100%. only the rich can buy horses. So horses are not available to everyone. Also, swords are a shitful battlefield weapon. They are much better for tournaments, right? Mostly what people used in on a battlefield arms or like some kind of easy club thing like a mace.
Bludgeoning.
Yes. Right? Swords are specialist weapons that require specific training to use. You have to be familiar with their operation, and it is more difficult to use them effectively. They are very effective when they are used effectively, but it takes a lot of training. Not a lot of people are going to have that.
Sable, you're dropping in and out.
Okay, I'm back. Hello, Flub. We're just at the tail end of the stream here, and I'm trying to do rapid fire myths about war we'd like exploded. So I'm please don't interrupt. Let me continue.
No, I only interrupted to let you know you were dropping in and out.
Thank you. Yeah. Stretch says spears were by far the most common weapon in battle. Yes, and this is part of the reason, guys, why bayonets are a thing. If you don't understand why bayonets are a thing, is sooner or later you run out of ammo. Or sooner or later the enemy gets close enough to you that you really can't afford to take the time to reload. And then it comes down to bayonets, guys. Yep, says Daz. Yep. Disrupting supply lines actually means murdering the guy with the cart and taking his horses or destroying his shit. Right? Euphemisms distance these actions, but this is what they are, right? Light cavalry generally does not charge the enemy in a run down a hill like in the Battle of Minas Tirith. The Battle of Helm's Deep. That's generally not a thing. That actually was a thing. That's based on a historical event. I'll get Barbarossa to tell you about it some other time. But generally, light cavalry's job is to scout, disrupt supply lines, and kill any infantry they encounter. Hopefully a smaller group than their own. Yes. Bayonets turn a rifle into a spear. Pikes are great for war and versus zombies. Yeah, it works because it breaks the enemy cohesion. Daz has a point. Yeah. Sometime I'm going to get into discussion about war strategies in Game of Tones, right? And why things are done the way they are, right? And I'm probably going to have Daz and Barbarossa on with me and Moon, right? Because we could probably like all do the thing and tell about how it works and why, but there's reasons why they do the things they do. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, cavalry charges generally only work when the enemy is surprised and not expecting it, and even then they tend to be lethal because they run up against the heavy infantry who, if they're smart, are defending with something big and sharp in a wall. Horses won't run on that shit. Totally innocent and got war. Yeah, sure you are. Yeah. Okay. Last thing. Oh, any more myths of war we want to dispel before I cover the very last thing? Yeah, Flub, in World War II, disrupting supply lines meant blowing up train tracks, which probably killed train operators, right? It meant blowing up ships, which killed people who were escorting the military convoys. There's a whole thing about we know about that here in Canada, or it represented blowing up on occasion airships or things like that, planes. Yeah, it's somebody dies. That's what disrupting means. Yeah, and yes, that is what the SAS were originally created to do. Okay. That's usually what small special forces groups are created to do, is that stuff, actually. It's generally not high profile assassination missions. It's take out strategic and tactical targets. Although those strategic targets might be people, but yes, we discussed that before. Strategic assets, right? Okay, one army is superior to the other. What makes them superior? Right? Very briefly, maybe they have huge fucking armies. Right? The big thing about Rome is that there were always more Romans, right? Chinese armies of the ancient world were mind-bogglingly big, right? There, okay, what is it? Like, there's the War of Three Kingdoms killed about 20% of the Earth's population at the time because things were so huge, right? Maybe their strategic asset is impossible to attack, right? The legitimacy of the city of Rome was the city itself, not any of the people in charge of it. So it could be an empire and it could be a senate and it could be whatever, and nobody gave a shit because Rome was the legitimacy, right? That's why the goal was to sack Rome, and once it was sacked, it became easier to attack, right? Maybe they have significantly more effective technology than the other side, right? This is often the case with the United States. They tend to have very good war tech, right? But little shifts can transform that entirely, right? Yes, the bigger the army, the harder to feed and equip. So cost was a huge factor. So you also had to be wealthy to maintain a big army. At some point, I want to sit with you and reverse engineer how big the zone cities in my world have to be to support the armies around the pit. That is a very good question. I wondered about. I love your structure, by the way, Kit. The way you've got that all set up, you've clearly really thought about the natural consequences. Yeah. Yeah. It's been known for wars to bankrupt a country. I'm going to look it up, guys, and I'll post it in my server. There is a video I saw about war economies, why war economies, war is good for economy until it isn't, I think is what it's called, something like that. I will find it. I will share it with you. It's really useful. Yeah. So if technology is what makes a force superior, shifts in technology could rapidly transform that. Right? Like the Walmart drones thing are causing a real problem for Russia. Just saying. Have I missed anything you guys can think of? Otherwise, I think we're going to call this a day. I know it's very brief. It's all good.
I haven't heard anything that I would want to expand it on. We've been pretty thorough.
Perfect. You really like this focused format? Thanks, guys. The feedback's good. I really appreciate it. I can't do this every day, but I could definitely do this at least once a week. Right?
This is a lot of fun.
This was fun. Thank you guys for joining me and contributing to this and making it so much more interesting and useful. I really appreciate that.
I'm really glad that I could help out with my knowledge of war and history and stuff.
It was very helpful. Yeah. All right. I guess we're done for today. Thank you so much. I had a good time too.
Big old hearts for everyone.
Yep, big old hearts for everyone. I will put the link to this. The VOD, I will highlight this, or I'll just upload it to my channel. I stopped uploading my streams to my channel, but I'll upload these ones to my YouTube channel, and I will put the link somewhere on my server, and I probably will put it in the GOT server for now too. Yeah.
Remember, people, the 3 T's of war: terrain, technology, and tradition.
Absolutely.
And a war does not fight on an empty stomach, and it does not fight on an empty heart.
That's well put. I like that. Who are we going to raid? Who's up?
Travis is still up.
Is he?
Yep.
We haven't been there in a while. Let's do it. Let's see.
I like what Arthur Goddess said. France helped them win, but now France is broke. Wait, if France is broke, why is the king and queen still wear such fancy dresses? Well, let them eat cake.
Yep.
If the people are hungry, let them eat cake.
Travis Tavern it is now?
Yeah, I believe so.
Travis Tavern Society.
Okay. Yeah, I knew he changed
I'll just
it a couple
put
times.
Okay.
Boop.
Thank you.
Yep, but yeah. That's my favorite quote in history. Let them eat cake, which was never actually said by her. It
wasn't actually referring to cake.
No. Oh yeah, Other Goddess, the history of the entire world done in the comedic sightings of modern random is great.
Yes. Thank you all so much. When you get to Travis, don't forget to shout, prepare to be boarded, because we are the Sable's privateers. I'll see you guys tomorrow. It will probably be a low-key kind of, work stream.
Chill stream.
And then, did we say we were going to go into women in warfare on Thursday, or are we saving that for next week or Friday?
I would say a combination of women in warfare, but also maybe throw in a little bit about those units.
Right, the different types of units and how to fight.
Yeah, we could go on for 3 hours about women in warfare, but let's add some variety, a little bit of spice to the mix.
Valid point.
Also, I did not understand the rock, paper, scissors of it, and I can make graphics.
Yeah.
Valid. Okay. Yep, so we'll do those as separate topics. We'll do one or the other on Thursday. See you guys soon.
Barbarossa out.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
You okay, Moon?